Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Town Hall. I'm about to call to order the meeting, and I understand, because I used to be the president of the Joshua Creek Ratepayers Association, how important it is to residents to show their numbers and push the capacity limits of the fire code. You will have already noticed that you're pushing the limits of the air conditioning system as well. I have a friendly suggestion, which is we make sure that those who have registered to delegate to council have seats near the front in the interest of time management. And those of you who are willing to be sports about it, to go to the North Atrium where we have a TV screen and audio and better seats than these, and listen and watch from there so that we don't attract the attention of the fire marshal. What say you? Is that a reasonable idea? It's lovely. I hear your assent. That's great to hear. Thank you. As we begin, I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that we're meeting on treaty lands rich in traditions of First Nations, and we appreciate the stewardship of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. I invite those of you who are remaining and those of you who are traveling to another room to rise and join council in the singing of O Canada. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, I see we have no regrets for this meeting. And Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Lapworth.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. I wish to register a declaration of pecuniary interest on item number 4 this evening, the notice of intention to designate 1333 Dorval Drive item, as one of my income tax clients is an employee of the Glen Abbey Golf Course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lapworth. All right, Council, what I'm going to do is, under my authority to vary the agenda under our procedure bylaw, I'm going to try to make the meeting more efficient by asking you to deal with the balance of the agenda, because it's all of a consent nature, before we turn to the item on Glen Abbey. So first I would ask for either corrections or a mover and seconder for the minutes. Councillor Chisholm, Councillor O'Meara, that's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor? And the minutes are adopted as printed. I would now, there are no standing committee reports for this meeting. Now, as consent items, we have item number 1, and we have item number 2 and item number 3. We have C1, confidential consent item, which is being deferred. And we also have a mislabeled consent item being the confidential discussion item C2. And we also have the advisory committee minutes. And I would like, and the recommendation on C2 is that the recommendation contained in the confidential report dated August 14th from the legal department pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality be approved. So may I have a mover and seconder for these matters? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? And they are carried, and that clears the deck as far as I can see on everything here. And that brings us to item number 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the delegations as listed in the agenda and the addendum. And after that, I will poll the audience, and then we will hear from staff, and then council will conduct its deliberations on the matter. Madam Clerk, would you please call the first registered delegation?
The first delegation speaking to item 4 on this evening's agenda is Peter Longo.
Welcome, Mr. Longo. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. Good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Burton, town councillors, town staff, and fellow citizens. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of the protection of Glen Abbey Golf Course. I love to say that my crutches and this dramatic effect, but I actually did break my leg, so I apologize. Not golfing. My name is Peter Longo. I've lived in Oakville for over 16 years, and I participated in 2002-2003 as a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for OPA 198, providing citizen input into the decision-making process associated with the development of Northeast Oakville, which eventually led to the creation of the Oakville Natural Heritage System. I'm the past chair of the Ecological and Environmental Advisory Committee of Halton Regional Council, known as EAC, and I'm the current chair of the Natural Heritage Advisory Committee to Halton Regional Council, known as NHAC. However, I'm not speaking on behalf of NHAC. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, my family, my friends, and any other Oakville citizens interested in preserving the town's cultural and natural heritage. I've reviewed the staff report with respect to Phase 2 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy implementation, as well as Appendix A and B of the report. As elected representatives of the citizens of Oakville, I would urge and compel Town Council to proceed as town staff recommended in their August 10th, 2017 report to vote in favor to issue a notice of intention to designate for the entire Glen Abbey property under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. On a personal note, my first 2 years of life were in Oakville. My family lived on Bridge Road in the early 1970s, and I was baptized at St. Dominic's Parish on Rebecca Street. Eventually, my family moved to Montreal, where I lived for 20 years. In that time, I carried an undergraduate in European history at McGill University and a master's in environmental studies, environmental planning at York University. Both degrees fed my fascination with global communities and built and natural forms that cities throughout the world were comprised of. Through my studies, I gained exposure to thought leaders in the realm of urban and regional planning with the focus on the connection between nature and cities. One such pioneer, Patrick Geddes, who lived 1854 to 1932, was a Scottish biologist, sociologist, educator, and regional planner who understood the important connection between nature and cities. As well, he outlined the theory of interconnection of 3 sociological elements: folk, or the people within a community; place, the surrounding environment; and the work, or economy. Geddes would carry out regional surveys of communities and their surroundings to better understand the connections. This approach is very similar to the ecosystem approach to planning, currently in use by the town and Halton region. Geddes believed the regional surveys were not only important for city planners and designers, but they're important for everyone interested in their surroundings. So he wrote, "Every region has its heritage of good and the burden of evil. Every inhabitant should strive to know what his region contains, not only its wealth of natural resources, scenic beauty, and heritage of culture, but the opposite picture as well, the evils of ugliness, poverty, crime, and injustice. The citizen must first study all of these things with the utmost realism, then seek to preserve the good and abate the evil with the utmost idealism." Geddes' methodology focused on the interaction between ecological, economic, political, and social structures of the bioregion. It emphasized the need for consideration for all these systems when planning, developing, and managing the bioregion. Everything is interconnected. Therefore, every component affects the others. It's important to emphasize one critical aspect of this approach, In order for these efforts to take place, there must be commitment on the part of all levels of government, at the local, the regional, provincial, and federal levels. As phase 2 of the Cultural Heritage Landscapes Assessment, researched by Letourneau Heritage Consulting, Inc., the report determined that the cultural richness of the property located at 1333 Dorval Drive goes well beyond the current Glen Abbey Golf Course. The 229-acre tract of land is in its current use as a historic golf course, given the first solo design Jack Nicklaus spoken wheel stadium-style course that has hosted a record number of Canadian Open tournaments. Next year will be the 30th time Glen Abbey hosted this prestigious tournament. In fact, I attended the tournament in 2004, marking the 100th year anniversary of the Canadian Open, when we were all cheering on Mike Weir in the hopes a Canadian would win the 100th anniversary, make the 100th anniversary of the tournament that much more special. Letourneau's report also highlighted other uses of the property over the centuries for Indigenous people, farmland and sawmill, private estate, and religious retreat, giving further credence to the fact that the 229-acre property is a significant cultural heritage landscape. In 2001, when my career offered an opportunity to transfer to from Montreal to the GTA, the community that I wanted to relocate was the town of Oakville. Oakville is well planned, with greenway trail connections between different parts of the community, and I knew that Oakville was not allowing the unmanageable development being undertaken by communities such as Mississauga. Oakville has always offered an amazing balance of cultural and natural heritage preservation, diverse communities to live in, excellent public and private schools, many programs for children and adults alike, as well as a good balance with commercial and industrial activities. The heart of Oakville has always been the Glen Abbey Golf Course. This is widely known provincially, nationally, and internationally. Another historic figure in defining cities throughout North America is the American landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted. He helped design Central Park in 1856 in New York City, the Emerald Necklace in the 1860s surrounding Boston, Massachusetts, including Boston Commons and Fenway Park, that had some parallels to the Oakville's natural heritage system, and then Mount Royal in 1876 in Montreal, Quebec. Each of these examples preserves vast tracts of land with cultural and natural significance within the urban form. These are great examples of the opportunity the town of Oakville has before itself to culturally designate the lands at 1333 Dorval Drive to preserve its cultural and natural heritage and protect it from future development. Recognizing the need to balance urban growth and cultural natural heritage protection, Town Council, with the support of town staff and a series of independent experts, I compel Town Council to do the right thing and to vote to proceed to issue a notice of intention to designate the entire Glen Abbey property under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We are at a crossroads in the preservation of the town's deep history and unique character that differentiates it within the GTA, the province, nationally and internationally. Tonight's vote is one step closer towards preserving the cultural and natural heritage of the Glen Abbey Golf Course and the town of Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Longo, very much for that information. I think maybe a word about process and procedure here might be in order. First, in May of this year, Council voted to recognize Glen Abbey as one of 4 significant cultural heritage landscape properties in the town. As part of that vote, Council and I requested that town staff proceed with the implementation of appropriate protection and conservation measures giving priority to Glen Abbey. Today, we are focused on the staff recommendation endorsed by Heritage Oakville to designate the Glen Abbey property under Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I believe that Council comes to the best decisions when our community is engaged and provides comments. Council needs to know how you feel on the proposed heritage designation of the Glen Abbey property. It is important that we consider carefully all sides when making a decision. This town has a long tradition of identifying and conserving our heritage, and we've been recognized for our efforts with awards such as the Prince of Wales Prize for Municipal Heritage Leadership from the Heritage Canada Foundation and the Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Award for Community Leadership. We were one of the first municipalities to have designated heritage districts, and we're up to 4 of them now. So it's not surprising that Oakville is taking a leadership role among municipalities in inventorying and protecting cultural heritage landscapes. We have even designated a tree, the great white oak on Bronte Road. You will hear more from staff later this evening on the provincial legislation and the policy statements that establish the ability for municipalities to recognize and conserve cultural heritage landscapes. But I think it is important to note that in the town's past experiences with the designation of heritage properties, these properties still remain in use and continue to evolve. It is also important to remember that this is not the final step in an official designation process. If Council votes to support the staff recommendation to issue a notice of intent to designate, that decision would be appealable to the Conservation Review Board. Tonight, Council looks forward to hearing everyone's views on whether or not the site should be designated as a cultural heritage landscape, including your personal history of involvement with Glen Abbey, its meaning to you and to your community. I want to emphasize again that the Club Link application for the redevelopment of the site is not the subject matter of today's deliberations. The Club Link development applications will be considered at a special Planning and Development Council meeting at 7 p.m. on September 26, 2017. I will not be recognizing or accepting questions or comments today about the Club Link development application. I want to remind everyone to allow every speaker to present his or her views. There's going to be ample opportunity for all to be heard. Council has a rule not to display approval or disapproval in an effort to a speaker's remarks, and that's out of an effort to be fair to all and not chill submissions from people who may not agree with the majority of a crowd. I leave it to your good natures to reflect on that and to cooperate with that if you'd be so kind. Council takes seriously its duty to keep an open mind and to make decisions only after hearing from all interested parties. And with that, I hope I framed the evening for you a little bit better, and I would ask the clerk to call the next registered delegation.
The next delegation speaking to the same issue is Stephen Gibbins.
Mr. Gibbins, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, members of Town Council, town staff, and members of the public. I have reviewed the staff report with respect to Phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy implementation, as well as both Appendix A and B to that report. I would urge Town Council to accede to the recommendations of the town staff contained within the report of August 10th, 2017, and to issue a notice of intention to designate for the Glen Abbey property under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I have prepared submissions, which I also read at the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee meeting on August 15th, 2017. The Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy Phase 1. I am aware that in January of 2014, the Town of Oakville endorsed the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, which is implemented in 3 phases. During Phase 1 of that strategy, significant cultural heritage landscapes were evaluated, and the Glen Abbey property was one of those landscapes. On February 16, 2016, the Glen Abbey property was identified as a high priority to proceed to Phase 2 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, Research and Assessment. Phase 2. I am also aware that on May 15, 2017, after thorough and objective review of the history, existing site conditions, and potential cultural heritage values associated with the Glen Abbey property, Letourneau Heritage Consulting, who assembled a team of experts, concluded that, in their professional opinion, the Glen Abbey property was a significant cultural heritage landscape as defined within the 2014 provincial policy statement. As a result, on May 25, 2017, the final resolution of Town Council was that the Glen Abbey property was recognized as a significant cultural heritage landscape and moved to Phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, implementation of protection measures, where we're at right now. Phase 3. I have reviewed the staff report of August 10th, 2017 with respect to Phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, as well as both of the appendices to the report. Number 1, the Heritage Review of the Glen Abbey Golf Course prepared by Mr. Ben Moody, and 2, the Cultural Heritage Landscape Values and Attributes of the Glen Abbey property prepared by Mr. Julian Smith. I have informed myself with respect to both the independent research and conclusions reached by each of these independent experts. More specifically, with respect to the Heritage Review conducted by Mr. Ben Moody, Mr. Moody makes a number of conclusions, including, but not limited to the following. 1. Glen Abbey was representative of a key era of golf course design. It was at the forefront of the development of stadium golf courses. The spectator mounds that give the golf course its stadium-style design, which Glen Abbey and Jack Nicklaus were at the forefront of starting, are very important structural elements of the golf course, and the retention is important not only to the interpretation of the design, but also to maintaining the integrity of the golf course layout and its design. 2. The Glen Abbey Golf Course is an early and representative example of a style of layout with its novel and purposeful spoken wheel design. Furthermore, Mr. Moody finds that since the layout of the holes is a key heritage attribute of the golf course, which gives it spoken wheel design, the arrangement of all the holes and the relationship between the holes needs to be protected as well. 3. Since it was Jack Nicklaus's first solo course design and project, he has proved to be extremely influential in the design and development of golf courses worldwide. The golf course is an early and representative example of the work of a golf course architect of national and international significance. 4. Glen Abbey's design and operation as a tournament course designed to accommodate PGA Tour events and accommodate the viewing needs of spectators has and will continue to provide an educational resource for golf course architects, landscape architects, turf specialists who can come and study and learn from its design attributes and challenging environmental conditions for turf growth and management. On my review of Mr. Julian Smith's report on cultural heritage landscape values and attributes of the Glen Abbey property, I note he concludes as follows. Number 1, if Glen Abbey were a building designed by somebody as notable as Jack Nicklaus and was considered to be one of that designer's most creative and important works, it would almost certainly be designated and conserved. 2, as acknowledged by Golf Canada, Glen Abbey is Canada's most famous golf course. It provides a clear and compelling example of designated cultural heritage landscape with high design, historical, and contextual value. It retains very high levels of authenticity and integrity, continuing to serve as a challenging setting for championship golf in tune with its original design and intentions. Finally, I understand that the heritage planning staff are satisfied that there is sufficient information to initiate the designation of the Glen Abbey property under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and are recommending that Council proceed in that fashion. On a personal note, as a resident of Oakville, I feel the Glen Abbey Golf Course is an integral part of our cultural identity. I had the absolute pleasure of sitting behind the 18th green at the Canadian Open in 2000 when Tiger Woods hit his famous bunker shot. Some 15 years later, I walked the grounds again during the Canadian Open, this time as a father, hand in hand with my children. My eldest son, Jack, prepared written submissions for council, and I also speak on his behalf. Whenever Jack sees a golf course on TV, he always asks us, "Is that our golf course?" He truly feels like Glen Abbey is the golf course and his golf course. My family and I have enjoyed many bike rides over the Smith-Triller Viaduct. We always stop to overlook the beauty of Glen Abbey Golf Course, both admiring the valley and the tablelands in the distance. When we see the Glen Abbey Golf Course, the children know that they are home. In all the personal and professional circles that I've traveled, Glen Abbey has always put Oakville on the map provincially, nationally, and internationally. Simply put, the the Glen Abbey Golf Course is a cultural and historical landmark within the town of Oakville. Town Council, as informed by town staff, have been diligent and sought independent expert advice with respect to the Glen Abbey property at each phase of the cultural heritage landscape studies and strategies. As a layperson reviewing all this independent expert material, it appears clear that all of the professional analysis is pointing in one direction on this issue, that the Glen Abbey Golf Course is significant cultural heritage property that warrants a designation under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I urge Town Council tonight to accede the recommendations contained within the staff report of August 10, 2017, which respond appropriately to the independent expert advice. Again, that Glen Abbey property warrants a designation under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and a notice of intention to designate should be initiated. Thank you very much for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbins, for your information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Renato Discenza.
Mr. Discenza?
Apparently, heritage is tough work. Between Mr. Longo and myself, we can take on anything.
Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Your Worship, honorable council members, and fellow citizens. My name is Renato Discenza, resident of Oakville, and I'm here delegating in a personal capacity. I'm here to strongly urge council to pass the motion recommended by staff, derived from a well-established and transparent process that we are now in the 4th year of its execution. Council should and must designate Glen Abbey Golf Course based on the policies, both provincially and municipally, the process followed, and the overwhelming evidence gathered. In discussing this issue with many fellow citizens, some feel that it's up to council in almost a fatalistic way, as if council has a whimsical view of this decision. To designate or not to designate. This is not the case. There is no whimsy in this decision. It is evident, logical, and compelling to designate. In my own analysis, I've read everything from the reports from this file since December 2013, where I first saw the draft cultural heritage landscape strategy presented, reports in all 3 phases, the Club Link reports from ERA submitted for a different proceeding. I've also read materials from the Ontario Heritage Act. And finally, I've looked at minutes from other councils around Ontario to see how they've handled these matters. So I have 5 points. While designation can be a discretionary process before starting, once heritage value has been determined through the appropriate process, such as the one used here, council has a duty to designate, and I'll expand on these. The town of Oakville has laid out an extensive strategy process. The evidence under the process is compelling. The heritage context for me, a non-golfer, is a major reason and driver for me choosing Oakville. And finally, the claim by Club Link that I heard in Heritage Advisory Committee that has been not allowed to engage meaningfully is a red herring, and I'd like to explain that. So the first one is council, in one of the more concise directives of Ontario policies, 2.61 of Provincial Policy 2005, significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. Note it doesn't say it'd be nice to conserve them or it would be a good idea. It shall be conserved. Second point, a clear strategy and process was articulated literally years ago. This process included 3 well-defined phases, consultation at each step, evidence and professional advice given through staff, and extensive public consultation. By the way, from a best practices perspective, from what I saw around Ontario, this council is supported by Heritage Advisory Committee, which seems to be a gold standard in governance in terms of supporting council decisions to be objective and thoughtful. Kudos to town staff. There is no whimsy here. You laid out a strategy, designed and communicated an appropriate process, sought views and evidence. So what's the information tell us? The evidence in a 300-page Phase 2 report, I was particularly struck by Section 8. This is where the criteria was discussed. My understanding is that Ontario Regulation 906, any one criteria could be a trigger for designation. In this, 3 out of 3 of the sections, and in fact all of the subsections, 9 out of 9, met the criteria, the strongest evidence for anything under 906. Going further, under Ontario Regulation 10.06, which looks at provincial interests, 2 more additional criteria were triggered and offered as evidence. Then under EICGA criteria, the most relevant for a golf course, an additional 5 of 7 criteria were offered as evidence of a significant cultural heritage landscape. So where 1 criteria might apply, you only have 10 to go on tonight. 10 times the amount of triggers. Then I studied Phase 3 reports that added independent views by Julian Smith and Ken Moody. I was further convinced by the significance of Glen Abbey as a cultural heritage asset when a world-renowned golf architect and a recent recipient of the Order of Canada, Julian Smith, for his body of work in this field, held that this was a significant cultural heritage site. The personal connection to the heritage and culture is about a shared experience in the community, and you've heard some here tonight. I know Glen Abbey was pivotal in our decision to move. My wife Norma and I attended a few opens here in the past, and we dreamed about coming to live in Oakville, and we were fortunate enough to be able to make that happen. You don't need to appreciate golf to appreciate Glen Abbey. In fact, it struck me in Ken Moody's report that this course was designed by Jack Nicklaus, quote, not only for the tournament player, but for the average golfer. So citizens of Oakville and visitors can experience the same course as champions of the PGA. Rarely does that happen in such a significant asset, that today somebody can literally walk in the shoes of some historically significant professional athlete. This adds to the need to preserve the experience, which will always be there, whether or not another Canadian Open's ever played. This is about what has happened and the experience shared there, and the future will unfold as it unfolds. You cannot take away the ability to experience where history is made, a town's reputation was defined, and people have gathered. Shared personal experience. That's what culture and heritage is about. Finally, I'd like to address one point that was raised by Mr. Flowers in the Heritage Advisory Committee, that this decision should be deferred because the owner has not had time to engage meaningfully or has not been able to digest the information. I offer these. We're in year 4 of this process. This process did not come out of the blue. A public open house was held on Tuesday, March 7th, purpose of collecting information from the public. The private landowners associated with any of those potential properties were invited to public meetings. My understanding is those meetings were held between March 20th and March 31st, including ClubLink, and I understand other meetings were held since then. The May 15th Planning and Development meeting this year, Mr. Flowers made the same argument. I need more time. We have to be engaged. And I reviewed the video last night of that meeting. And your chair, our worship, Mr. Mayor, was almost pleading 3 or 4 times to have new information, any views presented in that forum. Don't know if they have been, but I know there was a wide open door to engage and to discuss. But the most important point that I found out, looking at other municipalities, the owner's consent is not only not required, it is actually potentially in the counter interests of this council. A specific case I saw cited time and time again was Tremblay versus Lakeshore. I read the opinion of the judicial review of this case. Paragraph 23. Requiring the consent of the owner is not consistent with an overall reading of the Act or its purpose. Indeed, the Act contemplates notice to the owner, possible objections, and a hearing process, which happens after intent to designate. Paragraph 24. The object of the Act is the conservation and protection of the heritage of Ontario. This may interfere with individual property rights. Accordingly, in requiring the consent of the owner as a precondition to designation, the town, in this case Lakeshore, placed an unreasonable obstacle on its own discretionary powers, thereby fettering its discretion or aborting the process intended by the Act. And in the process is actually straightforward and contemplates all this. Paragraph 16, designation of property is procedurally simple. Municipality intends to designate a property. It consults with its advisory committee, if it has one. Unfortunately, we have a very good one. If no objection is filed within 30 days, municipal council passes a bylaw. If one is filed, Conservation Review Board takes place. So in conclusion, you have an obligation under the strategy and process approved and the PPS to identify, evaluate, and designate cultural heritage assets. You laid out that process, which returned overwhelming evidence and advice that Glen Abbey is a significant cultural asset. You unanimously agreed to that on May 15th and asked staff to come back with some tools. They brought back a report bolstered by even more independent advice. You have all the authority, moral and otherwise, to make this designation this evening. Any objections will be handled through the explicitly contemplated process. Members of council and fellow citizens, if Glen Abbey is truly not one of the most important cultural and heritage assets this town has, arguably the most significant, then you can save agenda time but not even bothering to look at the others. If you cannot designate Glen Abbey, which has the strongest evidence, most transparent process, the most impact, you can save your time for the other ones. Dear council members, for this community today, based on the history and culture of yesterday, designate this property for tomorrow so that we can continue to share a strong part of the heritage and culture of Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Discenza, for your information. Madam Clerk, please call the next delegation. Go ahead.
The next delegation is Karen Brock.
Ms. Brock, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
It's hot up there. We're sardines. Good evening. My name is Karen Brock, and I'm speaking on behalf of Oakville Green Conservation Association. Oakville Green is a not-for-profit residents association who have an 18-year history of preserving, restoring, and enhancing green spaces on both public and private property. I'd like to start with highlights from the Ontario Heritage Act, which we feel summarize perfectly the input from our members, as well as hundreds of other Oakville citizens. The Act states that there are 4 key reasons for heritage designation, and it's pretty easy to see that with Glen Abbey, we can tick all 4 boxes. Number 1, heritage designation recognizes the importance of a property to the local community. You see here tonight for yourself. But there is no doubt that Glen Abbey is the pride of Oakville. Secondly, heritage designation protects the property's cultural heritage value. And Ms. Shepard and town staff and specialized consultants have provided that information for you, and I believe there'll be more presentations tonight. But they've provided you with ample evidence of the cultural value of the Glen Abbey property. Thirdly, heritage designation encourages good stewardship and conservation, and that's where we come in. This is a mandate of our environmental organization. The whole 535-acre Glen Abbey property has enormous environmental value surrounding Oakville's largest creek, 16 Mile Creek. The property in its entirety provides vast ecological benefits, which I won't speak to tonight, but I will in September. Fragmentation would negatively impact the environmental value of the property. And fourthly, heritage designation promotes knowledge and understanding about the property. Glen Abbey has a well-documented, unique history reaching back to our First Nations people, as well as by pioneer mills for shipbuilding purposes. We know that Oakville was founded on the shipbuilding trade because of its oaks and pines. Pioneers Smith and Triller are historic millers who are honored by the naming of the bridge that overlooks the Glen Abbey Golf Course on Upper Middle Road. It's called the Smith-Triller Viaduct. The town of Oakville is open to change, as evidenced by its growth, especially in the last 30 years. But how it chooses to change is shaped by its residents and the council who represent them. And that is why we are here tonight, to show council we support staff's recommendation. I'd like to read another paragraph from the Ontario Heritage Act that could not be more fitting for this situation. And I quote, "Planning for the future of a strong, vibrant community requires knowledge of the past and an understanding of what we value in the present. Existing buildings, structures, and landscapes often define a community's unique identity and give it character and a sense of place. To help guide change, it's important to identify and protect the places in the community that have cultural heritage value. End of quote. Glen Abbey Golf Course is undoubtedly a cultural gem valued by our whole community, not just Glen Abbey, but our whole community. And it's also a legend linked with the legend himself, Jack Nicklaus, and is renowned nationally and internationally. I'd like to use the phrase YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard. Yes to green space. Yes to our cultural heritage. Yes to habitat. Yes to trees and the collective impact of over 500 acres of green space in our rapidly growing town. Oakville Green and its members are in full support of the proposal to designate the Glen Abbey property as a significant cultural heritage landscape. Thank you.
Thank you for your information.
The next delegation is Shelley Fisco.
Ms. Fisico, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Yes, thank you. Worship, Mayor Burton, councillors, and staff. This summer, I was fortunate enough to visit Nova Scotia House of Assembly, the longest-serving legislative building in Canada. As I walked by a worker, he alerted me I was passing Canada's oldest House of Government, and he proudly urged me to come in. As my trip to Nova Scotia was about exploring history and culture of Canada, I decided to venture inside. Upon arriving at the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly, I was surprised to see the picture you see displayed behind you, written in bold letters. The only three questions I ask myself are, what is right, what is just, and what is for the public good? Joseph Howe, March 2nd, 1835. At that time, Joseph Howe was on trial as he declared to the media he had suspicions that the police and the politicians were misusing public money. Joseph Howe defended himself, urging jurors to leave a legacy for their children in his quest for freedom of the press. Joseph Howe was acquitted and is now one of the most revered politicians in Nova Scotian history. As a result of my visit to the Nova Scotia Province House, it occurred to me that 200 years later, politicians and businesses are still being urged to be socially responsible and seriously consider what is in the best interest of the public. Oakville and Save Glen Abbey residents desire to live in a community and a country where what is right and just for the public continues to drive political decisions. Why do each and every one of us have a social responsibility to protect Glen Abbey as a national treasure? First and foremost, we must honor the Livable Oakville Plan, a legal document which conforms to the province's growth plan. The mission statement of the Livable Oakville Plan is to enhance the town's natural, cultural, social, and economic environments by ensuring that environmental sustainability, cultural vibrancy, economic prosperity, and social well-being are incorporated into all growth and development decisions. According to the Livable Oakville Plan, the Glen Abbey landscape was deemed open space and not zoned for residential. There are, however, currently 6 designated growth areas, and the Glen Abbey Golf Course is not one of them. Why would we develop an area that was not planned for residential growth and negate the long-term growth plan? The Livable Oakville Plan is a legal document which emphasizes the importance of...
Ms. Fisico, please cooperate
Yes.
with us. We're not considering the application
Okay.
tonight. We're only considering whether or not to issue the notice of intent to designate a cultural heritage landscape.
Yes?
Could you save your application remarks for September 26th?
Okay. So can I finish with my closing statements?
Yes, I'm just trying to say it's heritage tonight, not application tonight.
Okay. I thought I was addressing the cultural and heritage, but I will continue with my closing remarks.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In closing, I implore your worship, Mayor Burton, and councillors to consider the responsibility you have today. Your job is similar to that of the Nova Scotia legislature of almost 200 years ago. Please listen to the evidence presented today and objectively ask yourself, as did Joseph Howe, what is right, what is just, and what is for the public good. I know that you will take your task seriously and make your decisions based on what is in alignment with the Oakville Livable Plan, the Letourneau Report, Mr. Ken Moody's findings, and the unanimous recommendation by the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. I would ask Council through the Mayor to move today and designate the entire Abbey landscape as a cultural heritage landscape in order to leave a historical and cultural legacy for future generations. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and please vote to embrace, not erase, the history and culture of Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is David Spesic.
Mr. Spesic? Is Mr. Spesic here? Going once, going twice. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Paul Rice.
Mr. Rice? Welcome, Mr. Rice. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Your Honor and members of Council. I will try not to repeat some of the stuff for the preservation of time for those other delegates coming forward, but I applaud the members of the Council and the Heritage Committee for the work they've done over the last 4 years in promoting the cultural heritage landscape strategy. Excuse me. We understand it's built into 3 phases. 1 being inventory, 2 being research and assessment, and 3 being implementation of protective measures. I am aware that on February the 16th, the Oakville Town Council endorsed the recommendation of Phase 1 and directed prior properties as high priority to Phase 2. I'm also aware that research and assessment of Phase 2 was led by Letourneau Heritage Consultant, who assembled a team of experts, concluded that, in their professional opinion, the Glen Abbey property was a significant heritage landscape defined within the 2014 provincial policy statement. I am aware that the town retained under the Phase 3 several independent world-renowned experts to provide additional information and advice regarding Glen Abbey property and the golf course cultural heritage and heritage attributes. As per the staff report on 10th of August 2017, with respect to Phase 3 of the cultural heritage landscape, as well as appendices A, B, and C of that in the planning department was presented. In reviewing these, we can draw several conclusions, but we're not limited to these conclusions of these reports. Under Mr. Moody's heritage review of Glen Abbey, he concluded, as Mr. Gibbins put finally, Glen Abbey was a representative of a key era in golf design. From that key era of golf design of the spoke and wheel, one thing that should be noted is that legendary designer Pete Dye also visited Glen Abbey prior to designing TPC Sawgrass in Florida, which is another renowned golf course around the world. And he took from that the information, and he learned from an architectural point of view from Jack and what his design was with Glen Abbey from a heritage point. And it should be noted that Pete Dye is actually a doctor of architectural design by the University of Purdue. So he learned from Jack, Jack learned from him, and it was key era of golf in the design site. The course in its early design, as we said, the spoke and the wheel. Since Jack's first design, his solo project, it proved extremely influential worldwide in course design from every country around the world. Jack is predominant in all the major course designing in China right now. He takes a lot of what he did, and they take a lot of what they do. There's delegations that come from China to Canada to Oakville, and personally, from the business perspective, we see a lot of them asking to come to Glen Abbey, to play Glen Abbey, to come to see it if they can't play it. Even in the winter months, we've had delegates in my old business that I had here in Oakville that would ask to visit the Glen Abbey site just to even take pictures. Everybody would want to go to the top of the valley hole on number 11, delegates, and want to take a picture of it and bring that back home and to advise from a cultural perspective that they were at Glen Abbey Golf Course. One of the key findings of the secondary report from the Cultural Heritage Landscape Values and Attributes of Glen Abbey from Julian Smith, that he detailed The property is remarkable across all three categories of significance, and that's a key point. Remarkable across all three. Its design value, its historical value, and its contextual value. The value is created by the interrelationship between all three. And maintaining and keeping all three are integral to any cultural heritage landscape moving forward. If Glen Abbey were a building designed by someone as notable as Jack Nicklaus and was considered to be one of the most influential, creative, important works in the world, it certainly would be preserved and conserved as a heritage facility. And as Mr. Gibbins had said, acknowledged by Golf Canada, Glen Abbey is Canada's most famous golf course. It provides a clear and compelling example of a design cultural heritage landscape with high design, historical, and contextual value. It retains very high levels of authenticity, integrity, continuing to serve as a challenging setting, not only for, as Mr. Discenza had said, for golf, but for the daily golfer and professional golfers alike. On a personal note and from viewing for what we know, I'd like to quote some stuff from Jack Nicklaus's own website. Under the Jack Bear Design Company, their own website lists Glen Abbey, and I quote, "Glen Abbey Club has been a grand stage for golf history. Since opening more than 30 years ago, it's the first solo design of the legendary Jack Nicklaus." And that's from their own website. Also from Club Link's own website, and in their own words, they may scraped a little bit from Jack, Glen Abbey Golf Club, which welcomes the public golfer and Club Link members alike, has been a grand stage for golf history since the opening more than 30 years ago. And in Club Link's own words, they refer to it as the world famous property. It's also home of the Academy of Club Link, headquarters of Golf Canada, and the Canadian Golf Museum and Hall of Fame. What does this mean to view a piece of property as a cultural heritage? I have a personal story and share with you on golf. 2005, September 2005, I was at Glen Eagles Golf Club in Scotland. I arrived at the hotel and they said, "Mr. Rice, we have a problem with your tee time. There's a tournament, but we're going to let you go out before the tournament." So as I was about to tee off in the morning at Glen Eagles, 144 golfers behind me, my caddy asked me, where was I from? And I said to my caddy, "I'm from Oakville, Ontario, Canada." He proceeded to tell the starter, at Glen Eagles, they announce you at the first tee. He said, "From Oakville, Ontario, Canada, Paul Rice." And he, without any prodding of me, added home of Glen Abbey. And that was, to me, it felt like it was home. So. In conclusion, after following the due process, and again, I must repeat, since 2013, and I have followed this as a resident of Oakville from the initial stages at the end of 2013 to today and attended the Heritage Committee meeting on the 15th of August. It's been a long process, and I applaud the Town Council and the Heritage Committee for doing their due diligence and the due process of this with the studies, gaining the experts' opinions on what this means to Oakville. I urge Town Council to respond to the independent expert advice appropriately and follow the recommendations of the Heritage Planning staff. The Glen Abbey property warrants designation under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and notice of intention to designate should be initiated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Madam Clerk, please call the next delegation.
The next delegation is Fraser Damoff.
Welcome, Mr. Damoff. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm not going to take up too much time because I know that there's a lot of people behind me that also want to speak and probably haven't had a chance to speak to you guys before. I'm here tonight to ask that you unanimously vote in favor of the staff report, our staff recommendation to issue a designation under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for Glen Abbey Golf Course. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of the Save Glen Abbey Coalition, which, as of my last check, was over 7,000 signatures. In our opinion, Glen Abbey Golf Course is heritage and it deserves to be protected. There's a part of Appendix C in your materials tonight that really captures what we've heard a lot from residents, and I just want to read it for you here again. Glen Abbey Golf Course is one of Canada's most famous golf courses. It was the first course in the world to significantly enhance the spectator experience by combining stadium design with a hub and spoke layout. The success of the design influenced later golf course design both in Canada and internationally. And I can't say enough how much we have heard this from residents when we've been speaking to them. How can we do this to Glen Abbey? It deserves to be protected. And I wanted to share that with you tonight. As I mentioned, our petition has a lot of signatures, and before I came tonight, I tried to see the farthest reaches of where these signatures have come from, and to our best searches, we found from everywhere, all the way from South Africa to the UK and the US. So all over the world, people are paying attention to this and to your vote tonight. We strongly support this council and your worship in deciding on this very critical decision using evidence-based decision-making and not rushing into this on such a critical issue. In our opinion, if Glen Abbey isn't heritage, then we have to ask ourselves, what is heritage? It is a historic golf course designed by a legend of the golf community, and it is witnessed to one of the greatest golfing shots that we've ever seen. And I've tried that shot, and as Councillor O'Merrick may attest to my golf skills, it's very difficult. In closing, Glen Abbey Golf Course has been central to the design of our town. It's truly the heart of Oakville. And I want to repeat on behalf of the 7,000 signatures to the Save Glen Abbey petition that we support the staff recommendation tonight to designate Glen Abbey Golf Course under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Damoff. For your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Nick Burkus.
Mr. Barikas. I beg your pardon? Is Christine Langevin not detained by the media? Ms. Langevin, would you perhaps move up? And council looks forward to your information. We're such a polite town.
Yeah, you are. Hi. Your worship, town and regional councillors, town of Oakville staff, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, my name is Christine Langevin. I am the president of Fogwood Ridge Residents Association, Inc., but I'm not here in their capacity tonight. I am a chartered professional accountant, and I live and work in Oakville. I have lived in Oakville 46 years, and I'm just here to give my support to designate Glen Abbey as a cultural significant heritage site. Frankly, I'd be happy whatever you do as long as it doesn't involve developing the land known as the Glen Abbey Golf Course. Whereas I can't give any technical details or anything widely different than any other delegate tonight, I am here to give you my connections to Glen Abbey and what it means to me. In the early and mid-1970s, my family and I would travel around North America and tell people we're from a small town 20 minutes west of Toronto. When the golf course was built, the golf world, if not the whole world, came to Oakville. During my youth, I volunteered at the golf course, handing out pairing sheets, and that's who's paired with who, tee-off times, and a map of the course. If anyone was from Junior Civitan at the time might remember that tagline. Traveling in the 1970s and early 80s, we would say we were from Oakville, 20 minutes west of Toronto, you know, home of the Canadian Open. As a young adult, I continued to volunteer at the Open. I remember coming from working in Montreal, and in those days it was rare for the planes to fly out over Glen Abbey, or to fly out over Oakville, but they did, that day they did, and they flew out over the course as the golfers played, and they even flew over the Goodyear blimp. An hour later, I was there working on the course as a volunteer. So after many decades that Glen Abbey has been there and that the Canadian Open has taken place in our town, when we travel, we can now say proudly and with immense pride that we are from Oakville, period, even when we talk to people from Europe, Australia, China, Central America. And in fact, I was in Victoria a few years ago at the Bear Mountain Resort, which has another Jack Nicklaus designed course. And when I told the pro shop person I was from Oakville, she immediately recognized the name of the town and the association with Glen Abbey, or that Glen Abbey was there, and insisted on giving me all kinds of Bear Mountain souvenirs to take home. So, to this day, I spend time volunteering on the Glen Abbey Golf Course, not always at the Canadian Open, but for other community events. What does this all mean? Well, Glen Abbey Golf Course is not just a golf course. It's an Oakville icon and part of our identity. And if you live in Oakville, it's a part of you. So please allow it to remain part of Oakville's identity and part of mine, and designated a historical site. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Is Mr. Barrikas finished with the media? Still out there. Well then, why don't we invite Mr. Chris Stote to bring his delegation. Mr. Stote, welcome. Council looks forward to your information. Mr. Stote is a former member of this council.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, town staff. I have to say I scratched my head before coming here, having read the staff report in full, an excellent study. I was on the Heritage Committee when I was with Town Council, as well as the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, and I live in a heritage house in a heritage district. And it was really hard for me to think of why there would be any arguments against doing this. I've got lots of positive arguments, but they've all been made, and I've made them in submissions. So I'll just address kind of, so for what possible reason would anyone hesitate to designate this golf course as a part of our cultural heritage and to preserve it for future Oakvillians? The first one is the same reason that used to exist when the early heritage districts were established and homes were designated as heritage homes, and that is, I can't do anything to my house. It's going to become a dusty museum. Modern life cannot continue in this area. The value of my property is going to be reduced, and you know, I'm worried about that. I can't knock it down. I can't build something else. You know, those were legitimate fears for people who had no understanding of how that would play out over time. But I think it's clear today as we walk around the heritage districts of Oakville, and let me tell you, as a resident thereof, I can tell you many people walk around those districts and admire this treasure that we have created over many, many years of thoughtful and careful planning to preserve the beauty of our community. We look at parts of our community as a Currier Knives Christmas card. And in wintertime, there's really, you know, not much prettier in North America than the heritage districts of South Oakville. This is a great privilege that we have as a town. Now, I understand this one is different. It's a landscape, but as the mayor pointed out, we have a tree already, and this is a pretty special. It's a pretty special landscape. I want to point out, by the way, that in spite of my service on the Heritage Committee and living in a heritage area, you know, the business that I occupied most of my time with in Oakville was a tech business. So I'm not some kind of dusty historian who wants to hang on to you know, history and wants to sort of pore over ancient documents every day or anything like that. I enjoy the sense of continuity that we get from living in areas where people have raised families and where great events have occurred and where planning and thought have gone into creating the remarkably livable and enjoyable community that we all are privileged to share. Glen Abbey, not least in terms of some of the historic moments that have occurred there. Many of them have been mentioned tonight. I was present for the famous Tiger Shot 2, astonishing achievement. I was also present at the breakdown when people put perhaps undue pressure on Mike Weir as he walked up by singing "O Canada" at peak volume, literally thousands of people. Incredibly moving moment in spite of this disappointment of its ending. So again, we've adapted our heritage areas. The whole heritage regime has been designed to allow you to make the changes necessary to adapt to modern life. If that had not been the case, there would have been enormous resistance to it and pushback to it. The pushback that happened in the beginning did not last. The people who do live in those areas, even people whose houses were designated after they bought them, are now deeply grateful for what was preserved and for the steps that Town Council took. We all have Wi-Fi where I live. Everything operates just like everywhere else. And, you know, there are satellite TVs, everything, right? So, so I put that one aside and say, you know, so that's not a reasonable thing. Adapting to the demands and changes that modern life requires, you know, larger driveways, all of the kinds of things that have had to happen over decades have all been approved to the extent that they were necessary and compatible with the history. It's been quite possible to do that, and the process is not onerous. It is straightforward, and the Heritage Committee understands that it will not preserve these places if they are not adapted to modern life, because people can't live in them then, and who's going to preserve them? You know, they'll simply start to decay, right? So there's a very clear understanding when you're on the Heritage Committee that you need to accommodate change. If you don't accommodate change, then you'll get the opposite effect. You will have decay. So for that fear, I think that can be put to rest. The other is, you know, is this a kind of sleight of hand? Is this kind of a backdoor down zoning because the person is being told they can't do certain things without permission on the property? You know, in some cases where places have been designated heritage, that might have been actually a legitimate argument. I don't see it as the case here at all. I think that's just not an argument that can be made here, because we're dealing with a property that has always been zoned private open space, was purchased under that zoning, and purchased at a price commensurate with that zoning, and on which taxes have been paid at a rate commensurate with that zoning from the beginning. So it's not possible to paint this process as anything other than what it is, a legitimate desire to recognize something which is a central part of the identity and self-image of Oakville, to preserve it for the future, and to recognize its value in both the history of the town of Oakville and in the history of golf, and golf as a spectator as well as participant pastime. This golf course specifically contributed to the growth of spectator golf by making it a user-friendly activity in a way that it had not been. It is its very ability to adapt to change and to permit new use that makes it a historically viable place to designate. So I would absolutely urge you to do that and to ignore any naysayers on that topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your information, Mr. Stark. I see that the media have released Nick Barikas, and so we'll call Mr. Barikas to bring his delegation now. Welcome, Mr. Barikas. Council looks forward to your information.
Mayor Burton, councilors, town staff, citizens, thank you for the opportunity to speak. There's not a whole lot that I can add that hasn't been said already, quite frankly. Don't want to take up too much of your time. However, I felt compelled to come here today. Just a little bit of background. My name is Nick Barikas. I live in North Oakville. I own a business in downtown Oakville, and I'm also the chair of the downtown Oakville Business Improvement Area. Oakville has a very proud history of preservation of history, and also the maintenance and the expansion of green space. And I think Glen Abbey qualifies on both counts. So I'd like to urge council to vote tonight to issue notice that they go ahead and for designating it heritage. Thank you for your time. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Barikas. Madam Clerk, next delegation.
The next delegation is Denise Baker.
Welcome, Ms. Baker. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, sir. And good evening, Your Worship, members of council and town staff. As some of you may know, my name is Denise Baker, and I'm a land use planning lawyer with the firm Weir Folds, and I'm here tonight representing the Fairway Hills Community Association. As some of you may know, Fairway Hills is one of the first residential communities to be developed with adjacency to the Glen Abbey Golf Course as the organizing design principle. The community initially developed in 1986, with proximity to the course being a key defining feature, and the final phase was completed in 2003, carrying forward this design principle. It is now a community of 129 homes. As the name Fairway Hills indicates, the relationship of the community to the golf course is central to its character, and the proximity to and the views of the Glen Abbey landscape are but two of the reasons many of the residents choose to live here. By way of background, the mandate of the Fairway Hills Community Association is not only to improve the quality of life for residents of Fairway Hills by maintaining common spaces, gardens, and planning events to build neighborliness, but the association also seeks to encourage a sense of belonging and pride in the wider Oakville community through charity and fundraising initiatives throughout the town. It is for this reason that the association has been closely monitoring the town's cultural heritage landscape strategy, and in particular the consideration of Glen Abbey as a cultural heritage landscape. And the association has asked me to be here tonight to express their support of the Heritage Advisory Committee's endorsement of the recommendation to issue the Notice of Intention to Designate under the authority of the Ontario Heritage Act, and to ask Council to approve that recommendation. We have reviewed all of the materials prepared in support of the issuance of the Notice of Intention to Designate, and in particular the reports that are found at Appendix A and Appendix B in the agenda package that is before you. I submit in my career to date, as a land use planning lawyer, I have had the opportunity on numerous occasions to review and cross-examine upon a number of heritage reports. And in my submissions, both heritage reports that have been commissioned by the town demonstrate a thoroughness and, most importantly, an independent professionalism in coming to their conclusions with respect to this property. As such, it comes as no surprise that I submit that Council should in fact heed the advice contained within these reports and should have no hesitation in relying upon the material to make a determination that this cultural heritage landscape should be protected under the Ontario Heritage Act. What is clear is that not only do my clients recognize and value the associative context of Glen Abbey, but the Act and the regulations themselves indicate that this associative value is worth protecting. And specifically, I'd like to draw your attention to a few of the findings that echo my clients' interests in Glen Abbey, particularly to some of the findings of Mr. Smith's analysis under Ontario Regulation 0906. Mr. Smith clearly finds that the relationship between Glen Abbey and the residential neighborhoods meets the criteria necessary for a property to be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, and in particular, criteria 3.1 of the regulation on the basis that the property is contextual value because it is important in defining, maintaining, and supporting the character of the area. This finding in our submission has been appropriately captured by staff and the consultants within the description of the heritage attributes supporting the contextual value of the property. And while my client is supportive of the whole of the proposed Notice of Intention to Designate found at Appendix C in your materials, its attributes supporting the contextual value of the property that they most strongly value are those that include, among others, the visual overview of both the valley lands and the tablelands from the Smith Trailer Viaduct, the nature of the open space vis-a-vis the residential neighborhoods related to a distinct sporting culture with a unique type of parkland setting, and the visual and historical connections to the surrounding residential neighborhood. As the independent expert reports indicate, not only is Glen Abbey highly valued as a landmark with local, national, and international significance, it is highly valued by those in the closest of proximity, being the residents of Fairway Hills community. Additionally, and I add for you, there has been much in the media since the announcement of that this report had been completed, and there's been much in the media with respect to concerns of the impacts of the proposed designation on the daily operations of the golf course, as well as the future use of the golf course to hold the Canadian Open. And on those 2 points, I submit the following. With respect to the concerns about daily operations, I advise you that there are no fewer than 9 golf courses in the country with some level of heritage status. That does not include those designated golf clubhouses, which have been designated, for which the course itself contributes to the designation, or any golf courses that are considered as part of a Part 5 Heritage Conservation District. In each of the 9 instances, those golf courses continue to operate. Further, having reviewed the Statement of Significance in detail and the heritage attributes contained in the Notice of Intention to Designate, I believe it's implausible to legitimately sustain any argument that the designation will impair the ability of the golf course to continue to operate as it currently does. With respect to the future ability of the course to host the Canadian Open, it is well known that the designating bylaw cannot compel the owners of Glen Abbey or Golf Canada to host the Canadian Open at their property. However, the background reports and the Notice of Intention to Designate couldn't be more clear that it is the historic elements, the events that have occurred in the past, the fact that Glen Abbey has a high degree of craftsmanship and artistic merit, and that it's one of the most significant works by Jack Nicklaus that results in Glen Abbey warranting a heritage designation. If it can hold future Canadian Open, all the better. But if Golf Canada chooses to host those events elsewhere, that decision in my submission is wholly irrelevant to the heritage attributes of Glen Abbey that are before you and are contained within the proposed Notice of Intention to Designate. For these reasons, on behalf of my client, I would strongly encourage Council to rely upon the expert opinions provided and to protect the significant cultural heritage value of Glen Abbey by issuing the Notice of Intention to Designate attached to the staff report as Appendix C. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker.
Next delegation is Pauline Nowak.
Welcome, ma'am. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to speak on behalf of my family, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. When our family moved from Toronto to Oakville, I knew that I wanted to live in the Glen Abbey area. Not just in the area, but as close to the golf course as possible. And I'm not even an avid golfer. You see, I grew up in a home where Sundays were reserved for watching golf on TV with my father. He followed Jack Nicklaus's career in particular, and Jack became an icon to him. The Glen Abbey Golf Course was something that my father spoke of often because it was the first course that he designed on his own. My friends in Toronto are actually very envious that I live in Oakville, and they ask me if I live near the Glen Abbey Golf Course. To Torontonians, the Glen Abbey is synonymous with Oakville, and this is very evident with all of the press that we've seen in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the National Post, and of course this evening we have a lot of representatives from Toronto. There's something special that happens when I'm driving from Toronto to Oakville. As I'm driving along the QEW in bumper-to-bumper traffic, I truly appreciate when I pass Mississauga and see all the green trees, the open skies, and then the sign that reads, "Oakville welcomes you." And then I see the other sign that says, "Glen Abbey Golf Course, Dorval Drive," and I know I'm home. I love living in Oakville because of the admirable planning and preservation that has obviously gone into the landscape of Oakville. I had read about the Livable Oakville Plan, but now that I actually live in Oakville, I can truly appreciate the amount of hard work, foresight, and determination that must have gone into creating and preserving so many green spaces like Glen Abbey. There are walking paths and, of course, our historic downtown and waterfront areas. These are all precious gems that must be protected. Most of us here are parents and or grandparents, and as such, we have to ask ourselves, what are we leaving our children with? It is our duty to leave a legacy to them. This can only be done by designating the Glen Abbey property as a significant cultural heritage site under Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Now is the time we have to ask ourselves, how do we want to be remembered? It is our responsibility to preserve all of those memories, especially this year as we celebrate Canada 150, and it is our opportunity to create new ones in this cultural heritage landscape. And now we have an obligation to leave this as part of our legacy. Thank you.
Thank you for your information, Mary. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Patricia Hurd.
Ms. Hurd, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Burton, councillors, and Oakville residents. I have been a resident of Oakville for 22 years, have raised both of my children, and worked here for all of that time. These are my opinions on a personal level regarding the Glen Abbey landscapes. There are those who take no enjoyment from history, from traditions, from culture, or from heritage and what creates it. There are those who take no enjoyment from national events and in the memories, moments, and places that tell our story, who we are, and what is important to us. These stories, traditions, and memories are things that we want to and ought to protect and preserve for ourselves on behalf of those who created them and for future generations. Some people would not give a second thought to dismantling a historic landmark that has meant so much to so many for so long. They would erase part of the history of a town without truly considering what they're doing. Glen Abbey is the green heart of Oakville, and for the past 40 years has been a central element in the town's identity. As well as the Canadian Open, forever intertwined with Jack Nicklaus, who entered the Canadian Hall of Fame as a builder, has put Oakville on the map. One cannot adequately replace a 40-year-old tree with a sapling, or replace hitting off the tee at 11 with a plaque, or the amazing energy and memories this year at the rink with a stormwater pond. There are so many moments remembered and relived. Other than Fraser, how many golfers have tried to simulate the famous Tiger shot on the 18th? There is history, decades of history, that ties both the golfer of the century and the Golden Bear to these lands, which will have proudly hosted 30 national events. Once this landmark is gone, it is gone forever. What's more, this space has specific consideration within Oakville's plan and is recognized in that plan as a special study area, citing social, cultural, and economic benefits, among others, to our town. These factors that give Glen Abbey landscapes heritage protection consideration now already existed when the golf course was purchased by the current owner. The intervening years have added to and embellished that status even further. Glen Abbey has been promoted as world famous, to use Club Link's own words. They knew exactly what they were buying, and there is no automatic entitlement to other than that which they purchased. Club Link became the stewards of a significant part of Canada's sports history and culture when they made the purchase. I would ask the Council to move today to designate the entire Glen Abbey landscapes as a heritage site. Thank you.
Thank you for your information, Madam. Madam Clerk, call the next delegation.
The next delegation is Matt Staton.
Welcome, Mr. Stainton. Council looks forward to your information. Thanks for staying.
Thank you. This is my first opportunity to speak in front of council in my life. It's important to me. I was not born in Oakville. I was born in Etobicoke. But from a young age, I came to Oakville 3 times a year, as my father was the conductor of the Oakville Choral Society. When my wife and I got married, we had a decision to make where we were going to live. So we moved here 25 years ago. We have 4 kids. We've been involved in hockey, lacrosse, golf, and many other sports in Oakville. I'd like to give a bit of a different perspective. We've heard tonight about people that don't care about destroying things and moving on. I've lived that life. I work in the development and contracting side, so people look at me as the cold, callous contractor, and I'd like to tell you that that's not what I am, and that's not what our industry represents. I've had the pleasure of working for the same company for 24 years. I worked on some of the greatest projects in Canada and some of the greatest heritage projects in Canada. We retained the post office facade at the Air Canada Centre. I worked at BC Place, where we retained the old bank building, which is now the Hockey Hall of Fame. 2 Queen at the northwest corner of Yonge Street and Queen. 111 Richmond Street, Union Station, and currently the Toronto Toronto TD Centre. The TD Centre was deemed heritage because of the architect, Mies van der Rohe. I've been working there for 9 years. We have a project that'll carry us out there for another 7 years. What I can tell you is that when we have worked and demolished buildings and then built new buildings, there have been times where there are buildings that were not designated heritage. And I can tell you that quietly, under our breath, and after, at the end of the project, when you talk about lessons learned, myself and others have said, you know, we should have kept that. It's not a perspective that everybody gets to see. It's something that I do on a day in, day out basis. I make decisions whether we demolish and build new or retain the existing. So what I would like to say is it's a tough decision for us when we do these things. And I can tell you, never have we regretted keeping things. I look at what the town of Oakville and the council has done with the old Oakville Arena, and I applaud you for your decision for that. Under the same guidelines, I would like to recommend and endorse that you support the decision to designate the Glen Abbey property as heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Robert Jerfield.
Mr. Jerfield? Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, Town Council, and the staff, as well as residents. I've never played golf on the Glen Abbey Golf Course, and in fact, if you ever saw me play golf, you would be happy that I have not. It's been over 20 years that I played golf, and that's not why I'm here to speak with you today. Our family moved to Oakville in 2000, so we've been here just over 17 years, and it's a privilege to be residents here in Oakville. In my line of business, I've also had the pleasure of traveling internationally, most specifically to Latin America. Having deep roots here in Oakville, when I traveled to Latin America, I went down on Mondays, came back on Fridays, and spent the weekend here with my family. When going down to Latin America, people naturally would ask, where are you from? And being in cities that had 8 million, 10 million, 20 million people in it, my natural answer was a town outside of Toronto, with the natural view that no one would know where Oakville was. As people got to know me better, the questions, tell me the name of that town. What is the community that you live in outside of Toronto? And as I said Oakville, what surprised me as a non-golfer was the brightness in their eyes that immediately many of them knew exactly where Oakville was. Not because they've ever been here, but because they knew of Glen Abbey Golf Course. For that reason specifically, I think it's quite remarkable that people in communities, and I'm speaking specifically about Latin America, an area where I have some knowledge, that they understand the cultural and heritage significance of the Glen Abbey Golf Course, even though they've never been here. A second point that I'd like to make is that when people come to Canada from communities many miles away to different cultures, making a decision to move their family is often made off of familiarity, things that they know even if they don't know the area. So through my knowledge and through my information, there are quite a significant amount of Latin Americans who have come to make Oakville their home, not because they saw a golf tournament on TV, but because they knew of Oakville because of the Glen Abbey Golf Course. They knew of Oakville, and when they came with their families to investigate Canada, it was a natural place for them to start looking. Now, the golf course itself did not make the decision for them to become residents here with all of us, but what it was for some of them, I think for quite many of them, an attractive feature to start their investigation when they became residents here in Canada. I believe that we are enriched by having the community that we have here in Oakville, by having people come both domestically, like our family did from Calgary, here to Oakville, and like people from many communities in Latin America have come to Oakville to make their home. It is my hope that we preserve the cultural and heritage aspects of Glen Abbey and what it means to our community today and what it will mean in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox, for your information. Madam Clerk, please call the next delegation.
Next delegation is Noah Jerfield.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Your Worship, town staff, and council members, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I don't want to take up too much of your time because I think so much of the evidence that why the Glen Abbey Golf Course should be designated a cultural heritage site has already been given by my fellow neighbors and Oakvillians. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the thought process that I went through when I decided to come speak to you here tonight. I heard that the golf course was going to be, or was on the table to be designated as a cultural heritage site, and I started thinking that, yeah, that seems right to me. The golf course should be a cultural heritage site, but it wasn't immediately clear why that was the case and why I felt that way. So what lots of people my age do when they don't know the answer to something is I started to Google. And I Googled the word heritage first because I bet if I asked all of you council members and you, Mayor Burton, all my neighbors what heritage meant, you would all give me quite different answers because I think heritage means something different to all of us. But what Wikipedia told me was that heritage refers to events, locations, or processes that have a special meaning in group memory. And I think that's really interesting because the golf course seems to fit that to a T. We're all people, and we're all here talking about it, so it must hold significant to our own group memory. But I also knew that that probably wasn't enough to designate the golf course as a cultural heritage site. So I Googled a little bit further. And I found some of the criteria necessary under Ontario law. And the one that really stuck out to me was that the property has to have contextual value to the community. And I found that one particularly interesting because it's so ambiguous. What does contextual value mean? And one of the reasonings in the bylaw that I was able to find was that contextual value means that a site has to have be important to defining, maintaining, or supporting the character of an area. And I found that even more interesting because what does character mean? There's lots of ambiguity in the law. But to me, what character means is that it's the way it looks or the way it feels to be in a place. And most significantly, it's the character of a place that is defined by the people that live there. And so as an Oakvillian, I'd like to tell you how the Glen Abbey Golf Course has defined my life. I moved here in 2000 when I was 4 years old, and I'm now 21, so I've been here for 17 years, if my math is correct. And so that's what I think I can speak to best, is as a child growing up in Oakville, how the golf course affected me. Not as a golf course, and not as a golfer, because as my dad just said, if you saw me on the course with a club, I think you would run screaming. But how the golf course affected my childhood in other ways. I'd like to share with you two anecdotes that I think really highlight that. The first was how I first learned how to swim, because I was fortunate enough to live in Fairway Hills where my backyard backed onto the golf course, and as any other Fairway Hills residents can attest, it's a common occurrence that errant golf balls end up in our pool. And as a little 4 or 5-year-old kid, I hated putting my head under the water. It was something I was terrified of doing, but I loved to collect golf balls for some reason. And so I would ask my mom and my dad, hey, can you dive down there and get those golf balls for me? They said, no, go get them yourself. So I had to jump in the pool and dive all the way down to get the golf balls. And that was the first time I actually put my head under the water and learned how to swim all the way to the bottom. And I still to this day think I wouldn't have learned how to swim if it hadn't been for the golf course. The other story I'd like to share with you is the first business experience I ever had, and I'm now attending the Ivy Business School, which arguably is one of the better business schools in Canada, though I'm sure many people will argue that. And I'm about to graduate this year. And I honestly think that this moment in my childhood was the reason that I decided to pursue business. I used to set up lemonade stands with my little brother and sister just on the corner of Fairway Hills, which some of you may know. And all through the summer, we would make a couple dollars a day, maybe. It wasn't very good business, but it was enough to cover our fixed costs. And then one day, we made like $150. And I thought to myself, that's weird. Why do we have so much money suddenly? And then I realized it was because the Canadian Open was on. And for some reason, Club Link decided not to fully hydrate their visitors, so we got the extra business. And that was a really valuable lesson for me as I pursue my future business career, which I hope to be a successful one. And honestly, without the golf course, I don't think I ever would have gotten that lesson in such a real practical way. So to go back to how I started all this, is the Glen Abbey Golf Course important to defining, maintaining, or supporting the character of the area? I think the Glen Abbey Golf Course was important to defining, maintaining, and supporting my character. And as I already said, the character of a place is only the people that lives in it. So I would say, yes, it is. And to answer the question posed to you all today, which after listening to all this evidence, I really can't see how you could come to any other conclusion, but yes, the Glen Abbey Golf Course should be defined as a cultural heritage site. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Madam Clerk, if you would call the next delegation.
Next delegation is Keith McMillan.
Mr. McMillan. That might be Mr. McMillan. This is Mr. McMillan. Welcome, Mr. McMillan. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. I come here as a regular citizen, retired citizen, with no credentials to offer tonight, other than I love living in Oakville, and this is a town I've got to enjoy. First of all, I think it's been said before, but at the risk of repeating it, I think the town should be commended for taking a measured and not a knee-jerk reaction to evaluating the heritage of the golf course. This process was started before there was any application that I know to redevelop it. So I commend them, the city, for their action, the town, not the city, the town, I'm sorry, for this action. A couple of things, people are telling what they have or where or who they represent. I'm not a golfer, never have been, period. I'm also, didn't read the whole report. I only read parts of the report. But as far as I'm concerned, the Glen Abbey Golf Course, the Canadian Open has been here since '77, when it first came here, to 1970, 29 times. Now, 29 times out of a possible 40 times means something. There's got to be a reason for that. People talk about the stadium design, whatever. I'm sure that's all in it. But there are lots of prestigious golf courses in Canada, in addition to Glen Abbey. I'm not a golfer, but I can remember when I lived in Montreal, Royal Montreal, pretty nice club. But Glen Abbey, 29 times out of a possible 40 times to have the Canadian Open since it was set up, that got to mean something that's right with this place in terms of the design and everything that goes along with it. We have 3 other points. I know golfers, what I hear about them, they take pride in where they say they golf. Some say they played St. Andrews, they played Pebble Beach, and I think a lot of people have alluded this in many different ways tonight, that people love to say they played Glen Abbey. And I can understand why if you're a golfer. As a non-golfer, what I like about Glen Abbey is its pastoral, what I call urban, semi-agricultural appearance to me. Sometimes I've come off the crazy QEW at night and I drive into the Glen Abbey Golf Course. It's quite pastoral. It's quiet. You just sit there. You can do that in the winter. They don't put salt in the streets in there either. So it's a nice place to be. It's nice. It's part of the heart of Oakville. People subconsciously or consciously talk about their area, what's important to them, or green space is important to them. I think there was a gentleman here, and it's amazing how some of these people I have not talked to anybody with what I was going to say about tonight, but we have the same opinions. People talk about Hyde Park in London. People talk about Central Park in New York. People talk about Boston Commons. People talk about Mount Royal. I talk about Sunnybrook Park in Toronto. Why not? And I also talk about Glen Abbey and Oakville. It's part of our city. It's pardon me again, town. I've heard the mayor say that so many times, and I agree with him. So that's important to me. Years ago, like a lot of people, we had a choice. We were moving here from transferring from someplace else. Anywhere west of downtown, anywhere west of Mississauga was fine place to live. We chose Oakville for all the green spaces it had. Unfortunately, the less green spaces as the town progresses north, but we have Glen Abbey, and that's. When I used to work, I used to tell my business colleagues, because I used to deal with, of course, people internationally, U.S. primarily, and Canada, and they asked where you live, and I wasn't a golfer, but when I told them I lived in Glen Abbey, Oakville, you can't believe the number of people would say, that's where they play the Canadian Open, isn't it? I say, yep, they want to come here and play golf, not necessarily with me, but with somebody, so, because I don't play golf. The last point I'd like to make is that, one more point about that, the golfing is, I imagine the TV chatter, the social media chatter we got on the Glen Abbey this year and every year is one of the main reasons, probably the most important news out of Oakville, sporting news anyways, in a year. And I think that's important. It's part of our culture. It's sharing that with other people. The last thing, we often hear about assessments about where's the best place to live in Canada or whatever. And it's made up of a whole bunch of things. It's made up of educational background of people, proximity to services, crime level. And I'm sure in there is a culture of Oakville. And the culture of Oakville includes the golf course. It is part of the heart of Oakville. And I fully support the recommendation of the expert committees, or the consulting agencies. There were two of them that wrote the report. As I said, I did not read them. I don't have to read them. They're experts. We hired them to do a job. We as taxpayers hired them to do the job for the city. We expect, if they were prudent and forthright, which they should as experts, they tell it as it is. And I fully support the recommendation and hopefully hope that the town comes to the same conclusion, to move forward with a heritage designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan, for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Jane Knightlet.
Welcome, ma'am. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Jane Knightlet. Some of you may have met my husband. I will refer to him in my remarks. I'm going to applaud the previous speakers who cited policies and technicalities, and in the interest of time and to avoid redundancy, I am just going to fast forward to my personal remarks that reflect what I am saying from the heart on behalf of my family and my friends and co-workers. The first time I saw Oakville, 10 months before actually setting foot on Oakville soil, was through the eye of a television camera panning over Glen Abbey Golf Course. It was quite impressive. The CBS announcer told viewers throughout North America and probably other places throughout the world that this was coming from the home of the Canadian Open. Home in this case is an important concept. It is a location, but it is also much more. A home is a place where one likes to be, a natural environment of an animal or a plant, the place where something is or has been founded, a headquarters. It is meaningful through connections with the past, but if not protected, those connections can easily be bulldozed away. Consequently, if that is done, important history and the character of a community stand to be eradicated. On a very personal note, Glen Abbey Golf Course has been the place where my family, along with many other families, has celebrated birthdays, holidays, landmark occasions for the past 25 years. I'm confident countless others can say the same, for doing that during that quarter century, I've come to recognize many repeat guests in the clubhouse. After spending 8 months in the hospital, my husband was given a one-day pass to leave. We took him to Glen Abbey Golf Course, a place where he liked to be, or in other words, a sort of a home. He benefited from that just as much as he did from the many pills he took that day. Undoubtedly, there are others who could share similar experiences. I know that his personal day of having an enjoyable time and relief is not reason alone to designate this as a cultural landmark, but it does represent the fabric of a community. And speaking of other countless people who visit Glen Abbey Golf Course, why do Oakville citizens and visitors who hail from around the world all purchase and proudly wear so many shirts and jackets bearing that familiar golfing logo, the one that stands for the golf course, the one that we see posted on major roads and highways throughout the community? Because they feel in purchasing that they have a stake in and are proud to have visited a place that has been the grand stage of history since opening more than 30 years ago. This stage needs to be protected from obliteration. My husband formerly owned a picture framing gallery here in Oakville. Glen Abbey Golf Course management brought in to his business a number of pictures to be framed, to be preserved, and then hung on the walls in the clubhouse. These pictures featured the beautiful landscape and design of Jack Nicklaus' first solo project, Tiger Woods in his famous visit, and other PGA celebrities. Obviously, the management of the home of the Canadian Open recognized the need to preserve history. If this land is not preserved, neither will be its history. In their coverage of internationally acclaimed sporting events, broadcasters refer to the rich and storied historical significance of legendary sites such as Boston's Fenway Park, the Indianapolis International Speedway, and London's Wimbledon Tennis Club, to name a few. These venues have survived because the people of their respective cities have preserved their cultural landmarks. The same words, rich and storied, have been used to describe Glen Abbey, but we too must take steps to preserve our landmark. The home of the renowned Canadian Open is much younger than the places I just cited, but that is why steps need to be taken now. If the land is not protected from the perils of destruction, future generations will not have the chance to connect with their heritage. If this land is not protected, future generations face the prospect of meaningless brick, concrete, and steel, rather than an understanding and appreciation of their cultural heritage that has become a backbone and standard of Oakville, the place we call home. Therefore, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, please maintain the integrity of our community and vote to designate Glen Abbey Golf Course as a cultural heritage landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, Matt. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Glenn Powell.
Mr. Powell, welcome. Council looks forward to your information. You withdrew. Withdrew.
Your Worship, Mayor Burton and members of Oakville Council, staff of Oakville, and the many people tonight who have given a real heartfelt expression of their value that they put on the Abbey, Glen Abbey. My name is Glenn Powell, and I have lived in Oakville for more than 35 years. Although born in London and raised on a farm near Paris, all in Ontario, I do consider Oakville my home. And I am concerned about Oakville's ability to live up to the goal of being the most livable town in Canada. Because livable in my books must include green space and recreation facilities, in addition to such parameters as employment, housing, transportation, and so on. Glen Abbey provides both green space and recreation, and maintaining this property with a natural heritage designation is, I submit, a key component of a livable Oakville for today, tomorrow, and generations to come. To further identify myself, I do play golf, and while many of my friends will say I don't play very well, I do enjoy the game, and I am concerned about the prospect of losing yet another golf course in our community to the deep-pocketed developers. I have seen Richview become houses and can only watch as Saw-Wet suffers what appears to be the same fate. And while I hate to say it, I am also old enough to remember the Lido course at Bronte Road and the QE. It is gone.
Sir, do you have remarks that are directed at the heritage proposition?
I do, sir.
Thank you.
At a time when society is encouraging more recreation and more outdoor activity, can we live in a communal community the transfer of nearly 100 acres of green space? In what I admit is a very unscientific poll, I asked a few friends of mine who do not live in Oakville what they associated with the mention of Oakville. The majority replied, the Ford plant, but not far behind with the mention of Glen Abbey and the Canadian Open. Played at the Abbey 28 times, 29 times in the past 41 years, as we've heard from others. Glen Abbey in many ways defines Oakville. To lose this golf course to residential or commercial development is to lose a significant portion of the identity of the town. I support those citizens who had the foresight and financial resources to purchase homes in the area bordering Glen Abbey and now find their chosen location of living adjacent to green space threatened by the proposal to develop the golf course. I'll skip along here and say that once developed and the developers have stashed their profits in some offshore tax haven, Glen Abbey and what it offers for recreation, habitat, and international recognition for Oakville will be lost forever. You simply cannot undevelop land once the mistake has been made. As councillors, you have the reports from the experts commissioned to provide fair, objective, and nonpartisan opinion evidence. And it is their conclusion that based on the evidence, Glen Abbey is a property worthy of designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. In summary, I urge the Council, after recognizing the Glen Abbey property as a significant cultural heritage landscape, to now take that next step and follow the staff recommendation to issue a notice of intention to designate the Glen Abbey property under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell, for coming around to heritage. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Peter Sharp.
Welcome, Mr. Sharp. Council is looking forward to your information.
Thank you. I'll come straight to the point. Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. Many speakers tonight, so many of the topics I was going to talk about are covered, and out of respect for your comments about the application, I'll save that to the next meeting. So I'll be very brief. My representation is solely for myself. I am a resident not only of Oakville, but of Glen Abbey. Now, I'm not pretending that I represent the people who live in Glen Abbey, but we're a polite, friendly town. We talk to each other quite often. And I can't find anybody who's in favor of this or who thinks it'll be a good thing. I can find many people who feel, whether they're golfers or not, that this is central to our community. the quality of our life, the quality of our air, certainly, Glen Abbey is central to that. It's a real part of that. A couple of the persons have mentioned walking through there in winter, which I do quite frequently. There's actually golfers out there in winter too, if you can believe it. But it's such a spectacular, beautiful place. It's well worth it. I'll be very brief, and I'll come right to the point of what I really wanted to say. We are, in fact, not the only residents of Glen Abbey, or in fact of Oakville. There is a tremendous amount of wildlife in that area. And we as human beings have had a rather dismal record and stewardship of looking after wild areas. Not suggesting that a golf course is a wild area. But I am a golfer. I do love golf, and I've been very fortunate to have golfed at Glen Abbey many times. And each time I've been there, I've seen something absolutely amazing. In fact, the last time I was there on a tournament, I saw 2 falcons in the trees and bushes fighting over a rabbit that one of them had caught. I know it sounds like I'm making this up, but the 4 of us, we just stood there and watched it. It was absolutely incredible. There's all kinds of wildlife there, and we owe it to them to designate this as a heritage site. I have many other arguments about doing so, but they've already been made. And I know this is an absolute fact because I bought my home in 2000, so I've been there for 17 years, and I'm quite chatty with the previous owner. And he told me, oh yeah, you'll see deer walking through this green space back here, and indeed I did. I saw deer, foxes, many other wildlife. What's that got to do with Glen Abbey? I'll tell you. There was recently, a few years ago, on Dorval, between Glen Abbey, Dorval, and part of 16 Mile Creek, there used to be a nice little wild space there. That was all ripped up, and some condominiums put in there. After that, no deer, no foxes. Lots of squirrels, raccoons. They were cut off. Now, this is a fully functioning golf course. It's a spectacular one, but it's also a home to wildlife. So I urge you to move forward with the heritage designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, sir. We can now call Mark Flowers on behalf of ClubLink Corporation and ClubLink Holdings. And I know I can count on everyone's good natures to be polite and respectful. Welcome, Mr. Flowers. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Mark Flowers. I'm a lawyer with Davies Howe, and I represent ClubLink, the owner of the Glen Abbey Golf Club. Mr. Mayor, you'll recall that the last time I appeared before this council was on May 15th of this year, and at that time, council, of course, directed staff to proceed with Phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy for the Glen Abbey property. At that time, you assured that ClubLink would be given an opportunity for meaningful engagement in the Phase 3 process. Regrettably, thus far, the town has failed to honor that commitment. We asked to have input into the terms of reference for the Phase 3 analysis, and we were denied. We asked town staff to arrange a meeting among the respective heritage consultants. We were told no. In fact, we only became aware of who the town's heritage consultants were for Phase 3 after we received copies of their final reports, background documents that were included with the reports. That totaled approximately 900 pages of material. We got that only in the few days leading up to the Heritage Committee meeting of last week. Further, although we were alerted some time ago by staff that there would be a report coming forward to the Heritage Committee last Tuesday, we were not told that it would be a recommendation report involving the proposed designation of the property under the Heritage Act. We only learned that when the staff report was released on the Friday before the Heritage Committee meeting. Perhaps even more importantly, the critical piece of that staff report, namely the draft Notice of Intention to Designate, Appendix 3, includes, of course, the proposed heritage attributes. That was not even provided with the staff report. The staff report referred to that document with the clear implication that it had been prepared, but offered no explanation as to why it was not provided with the staff report, only to say it would be provided separately. Representatives of ClubLink and Golf Canada met with town staff last Monday morning, less than 24 hours before the Heritage Committee meeting, and still that document was not produced. Instead, ClubLink first received the very document that the Heritage Committee was being asked to endorse, and now the one that you're being asked to endorse, at 6:15 on the evening prior to the committee meeting the following morning. As a result, ClubLink was given less than 16 hours, and I would note that most of that was through the night, to respond to a document that establishes the very foundation of the proposed heritage designation. Now, it was a 4-page document, so did we have time to physically read the document? Of course. Were we given sufficient time to thoroughly review the contents of that report and the document, specifically the Notice of Intention to Designate? Did we have time to consult with our advisors, understand the implications of that document, and meet with town staff to discuss and hopefully address ClubLink's concerns? Absolutely not. And as a result of that, we requested that the Heritage Committee defer consideration of this matter to allow that opportunity to occur. Regrettably, we were denied. The chair of the committee noted that the town's cultural heritage landscape strategy has been ongoing for several years. You've heard that from some of the speakers earlier. That simply misses the point. It appears that for some reason both staff and the Heritage Committee are intent on simply rushing this through. And I would note that when I was here at the May 15th council meeting, I recall Councillor Elgar specifically commenting to staff that for this process, he wanted to ensure that there was sufficient opportunity for public consultation, and as a result, that it not occur in the summer months. And of course, here we are in August now. Having said that, obviously, you still got a pretty good turnout from the public. But the point is that this really does seem like a rushed process. And I'm not talking about from the start in 2013 or 2014 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy. I'm talking about the Notice of Intention to Designate. I can tell you that what we have reviewed, and as a general comment, the proposed heritage attributes that staff have identified are an overreach in the extreme. To suggest, for example, that the spatial organization, I'm quoting here, spatial organization of every tee, hazard, planting, fairway, and green on the golf course has cultural heritage value worthy of designation is excessive. It's contrary even to the opinions of your own heritage consultants. The proposed heritage attributes also inappropriately refer to the historic and, in quotes, the ongoing use of the property as a golf course. Staff has acknowledged, and I think you heard a couple people acknowledge it today, the town cannot dictate that the lands are used to operate a golf course, nor can the town control whether or not the Canadian Open is held at Glen Abbey at any time in the future. Many of the proposed heritage attributes, in addition, are simply too vague to be capable of any objective assessment. Consider, for example, one of the heritage attributes. This is the way it's worded. The carefully designed visual unfolding of each hole as part of the golfing experience, both aesthetic and functional. I ask you, what does that mean? Unfortunately, we don't know, and that's a big part of the problem. The proposed heritage attributes staff have identified are so all-encompassing and so vague as to be incapable of any objective assessment. Operating golf courses are constantly evolving. They're subject to change on a regular basis for any number of reasons, and that point I know was made by the National Golf Owners Association, who have submitted a letter to the town. The town has also received correspondence, of course, from Golf Canada, expressing concerns regarding the breadth of the proposed designation and the uncertainty it creates. ClubLink shares these concerns, but even in a more immediate context. Further changes to the course are currently being planned as part of its normal business operations. And the town's rush process threatens to curtail even these ongoing course management activities. Now, town staff will claim that the proposed designation is not intended to negatively impact the ability of ClubLink to continue to operate the course, nor the ability of the Glen Abbey to play host to the Canadian Open next year and potentially beyond. That is, of course, prior to Golf Canada's selection of a new long-term home for the Open. But that is the potential effect. and yet staff still wants to proceed right now. Thus, a reasonable inference can be drawn that the primary purpose of this proposed designation, with the attributes that have been identified, is not actually about heritage conservation, rather an attempt by the town to frustrate Club Link's redevelopment proposal. In response to the concerns identified by Club Link and Golf Canada, town staff has suggested that perhaps a management plan for the course could be prepared, which could identify, for instance, certain alterations that would not trigger a permit application process. However, despite suggesting that, staff has not presented Club Link with any draft of a management plan to date, and yet are still recommending that you proceed with the start of that process tonight. Staff did provide Club Link with a copy of an example here in the town of Oakville of a heritage designation bylaw that includes a management plan or a maintenance plan. And that, in fact, is bylaw 2010-48. That's the one that, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned earlier this evening in your remarks. That is the Bronte white oak tree. These lands are owned by the region of Halton, and there's a management plan or a maintenance plan attached as a schedule to the designation bylaw. So just for comparison purposes, the town saw fit to include a maintenance plan or a management plan in the designation bylaw for a single tree on lands owned by a public authority, and yet hasn't seen fit to prepare a draft management plan for an operating golf course on over 200 acres of land owned by a private entity. In their report, staff has also said they are willing to discuss interim management of the property before any designation bylaw would be passed. That suggestion, frankly, does not address Club Link's concerns, as the staff report quite correctly points out that as of the day the notice of intention to designate is given, the property is effectively treated as though it had been designated. For all of these reasons, Mr. Mayor and members of council, we request that council honor the commitment made at the May 15th meeting to ensure that Club Link has an opportunity for meaningful engagement in this process. And accordingly, we ask that you not adopt the staff recommendation to rush this ill-conceived designation through this process, and likewise that council not proceed to issue the notice of intention to designate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your information, Mr. Flowers. Are there questions for the gentleman? Councillor Elger.
Thank you for coming and delegating tonight. Because I'm just concerned, do you feel that Ken Moody and Julian Smith are not credible experts in their field?
I don't know either of those gentlemen. I've read their reports, but frankly, I'm not here to comment on whether or not they have the proper credentials. I'm looking at the specific document that is before you for essentially approval to be issued, and that is the notice of intention to designate. And as I've said, our view is that the attributes primarily are overreaching. They are extremely vague, as I've pointed out, and I believe that they also fundamentally try and deal with the issue of land use, which I think is improper. I would note, and one of the comments I made was that, in fact, I think I said that the way that the attributes are worded, in fact, seems to even be contrary to the town's heritage consultants, and I was thinking specifically about some of the comments that Mr. Moody made in his report, where he actually talks about certain trees that have been planted on the course that he thinks is actually basically saying that these were not appropriate plantings and that they really should be removed, and that they detract from, these are my words perhaps, not his, detract from the original design of the course. Yet at the same time, you have heritage attributes being put forward that literally say the spatial arrangement of every planting has cultural heritage value.
Okay, well, you've confirmed you did read the report, because I read that also. But you're not saying they're not experts. That's what I wanted to say. And you did read the report on why they said what they said?
I read Mr. Moody's report. I read Mr. Smith's report. I must admit, I don't believe that I read all of the material. As I say, there was about 900 pages of material provided to us, because I think it was Mr. Moody had attached a number of background documents that he had referred. So in total, that's where I got the 900 pages. I skimmed through some of that. I can't recall whether I read all of that material.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. And I do have a copy of my submissions I'm happy to hand up to the clerk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flowers. All right, I will poll the audience. I'm going to do this with a little bit of a context. Our meeting goes till 10:30, and it's 10 minutes after 9. And so when I ask if there's anyone else who has information for council on this matter, please understand that depending on how many you are and how long your information is, you crowd the clock, perhaps. Is there anyone here with additional information that we haven't heard before that you'd like to bring to the attention of council? Yes, ma'am. Would you please come forward, identify yourself, and share your information?
Thank you, and apology for registration.
And before you do, I just need to take care of one thing. Council, I need a motion to waive the bylaw to permit delegations after noon. Moved by Councillor Elgar, seconded by Councillor Adams. All in favor? And that carries, and you're welcome now.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and Honorable Town Councillor and Oakville residents. I won't take 1 minute. I'm here on behalf of myself and my family, and I think it's now more than 35 Oakville residents are from China. They chose Oakville as their home outside of China instead of Toronto because to them, Glen Abbey, Oakville equal to Glen Abbey. So without Glen Abbey, Oakville loses identity. That's all I want to say.
Before you finish, could you tell us your name, please?
Oh, sorry about that. My name is Grace Cleary, Oakville residents.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your information.
Thank you.
Are there others? I'm not seeing any, council, so I'll confine the discussion to council now and turn to the, oh, I'm sorry. Just in time. Please come down and identify yourself. We look forward to your new information.
Thank you, Your Honor, and council and all the members here. And thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I would like to share some thoughts and feelings from a personal point of view. My name is Jane Soper Kennedy, and I have lived in Oakville for 37 years. I've worked here. My kids were born here. They were married here. They have children who are being brought up here as well, so we're long-time residents of Oakville, and we love it very much. Glen Abbey is very important in our family because, excuse me, we have a long history of golfing in our family, dating back to my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my father, and myself, and now my children and their children are learning golf. All three of my children worked there during their summer vacations as students when they were in university. This gave them the opportunity to contribute to their community and learn work skills, responsibility, working with the public, all among all the other skills developed with that job, and now they are working with the public. Two of my daughters had their wedding receptions there. It was a spectacular place to have a reception. It was beautiful. And then concerning the Canadian Open, we were very involved with that too. I volunteered at the Open. All of my daughters worked at the Open. And wherever I go, and I spend a lot of time in the States, I talk about Oakville and the home of Canadian Open, and my friends are all very excited about it. It's kind of like the Masters, and so I do talk a lot about and they all watch it on TV and come up if they can. Concerning the cultural heritage aspect, defined as intangible attributes of a group or society that are inherited from the past generations, maintained in the present, and bestowed for the future benefit of future generations, I do see that as a very important feature for Glen Abbey. Not only for golfing, because not everybody golfs, but I would say that there have been many, somebody else spoke on this, weddings, receptions, and family events held at Glen Abbey. Not only because of the clubhouse, but the beauty, the driving down that driveway in any season is spectacular. They have Christmas brunches and all kinds of dinners and all kinds of things that the community can participate in over a year-round basis. So I would like you to consider that this is something that I would like to see passed on to the future of the youth of Oakville, to not only have an opportunity to enjoy the outdoors, to learn golf, to maybe have a possibility of working there. The other thing I have noticed about the Glen Abbey Golf Course is there are quite a few charity golf events. And this brings in people from all around Ontario or Canada. It helps raise a lot of money for really good charities. I think the hospital has theirs, and the United Way and Chamber of Commerce. So it's used very much by the community, not just for members of the golf course. I won't go on and on about everything because it's all been said. But I think that the Canadian Open brings people from all over the world. It is an international event, something that I'm proud of. I think us, everybody here is very proud of it. And it's something that I would very much like to see continue on in the history and life of Oakville. So I do support that the property have a cultural heritage designation. And thank you for all your good work. I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you for your information, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Janet Van Hoeksloot, and I'm going to be brief, very brief.
I'm only concerned to ask you to speak to the matter of heritage.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, I am an Oakville resident of nearly 30 years. I'm not a golfer, but I think by representing the people here, we can state that whether we're golfers or not, the Glen Abbey Golf Course is important to Oakville. That said, I'm going to take it beyond that. I'm going to take it beyond Oakville. I'm going to take it beyond that as citizens of Canada. And that is, I got asked tonight by a reporter, why was it important to me? And it got me thinking. I believe in the democratic process. I do understand that there's a business at stake. But we as Canadian citizens, this is our St. Andrews. As Canadian citizens, aside from it being the town of Oakville. It is the foundation for the Canadian Open. It is an international representation of this country, let alone this town. And we have an obligation in our democratic process to protect what is important to these people. That said, I heard Mr. Flowers, and I want to just make a rebuttal because his comments were directed at the town council. And I want to say, Mr. Flowers, that you bought this property, and I realize there's going to be something in September. There is no one here that can say at any given time that this has not been a heritage property, whether it was designated or not. And that said, it is not the town council that is pushing this through. It is the citizens of this town who want Club Link to do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you for your information. It was a near thing, but she kept to heritage. I'm now going to confine the matter to staff and council, and I'm going to turn to the commissioner, Ms. Closey.
Mayor and members of council, Susan Shepard,
And before I do, considering how long we've been sitting and listening, is there an interest in a bio break, if you can keep it to 5 or 10 minutes? No? People want to press on? And how about my hard-working staff?
we're fine.
Then on we go, and you're up.
Okay. Mayor and members of council, Susan Shepard, our town's heritage planner, will provide you a more detailed presentation. I stand really to address 3 issues that we've heard on an ongoing basis through our consultation with Glen Abbey. The first is the request to defer the application or defer the notice of intent to designate. I will go back to many of the speakers. This has not been a rush process. We have been here for quite some time, actually starting in 2009, as you've heard, with our Livable Oakville policies that looked at our cultural heritage landscape as an important element to understand. We began with a strategy, we looked at the town as a whole, we identified sites, and you identified the priority for us to look at Glen Abbey, which we're here tonight with this notice of intention to designate. The specific concern raised by the applicant dealt with the recent events with the Heritage Oakville and the values and attributes to be provided. I can let council know that we have provided to the applicant on an ongoing basis all the information that we've had at our disposal as we moved along. In addition, I'd like to indicate that there is no requirement for us to consult with the applicant throughout this early stage of the process. This is the first stage in looking at a notice of intent to designate. The bylaw itself would not be dealt with until sometime in the future. And so as we have said to the applicant, we are not supportive of a deferral. It is important that staff understand what is council's intent in terms of the values and the attributes on that site. They form the basis on which we will then begin to develop a designation bylaw. Through that process, with the notice being provided, is the opportunity for the applicant to get involved, the landowners, the community to be involved in us developing that designation bylaw. It is our intent, as we have indicated to the applicant and others, that we'll look at a conservation plan for the ongoing or the continued use of Glen Abbey as a golf course. That seems to be the best mechanism in which to provide for the attributes that are on the Glen Abbey site. That was the first item I wanted to deal with. The second was, what is the actual impact on the golf course? The objective of the designation is to not create a museum or static site. That, in fact, would impair what is the designation or the values that have been identified for Glen Abbey. It is to allow for a dynamic evolution or change on the site itself, so that it continued to perform as a tournament golf course and a recreational venue for golfing in the future. So with our full understanding of the attributes, we can then begin to develop that conservation plan as I referred to before. So our indication and our comments back to all involved have been that the intent of this designation is to allow the golf course to change in the future and continue to provide for the elements it currently does. The last point that I wanted to deal with was the actual impact of this decision on the applications that council currently has available and that we will deal with in September. At this point in time, staff have wanted to understand the reason for the interim control bylaw in the first place. What are the heritage attributes on the site? We see the cultural heritage elements as being separate and distinct from the application itself. So at this point in time, we're looking at those attributes through this process, and only after we've understand what council's position is on those attributes will we then analyze its implication on the application. So very much they are two distinct matters. We'll deal with the application and its analysis in September on the 26th. So Sue, as I had said, Sue Shepherd will outline the research and the evidence that supports the recommendations that we've made to council to designate. But I did also want to acknowledge the many speakers tonight who have shared their views and opinions about Glen Abbey and the importance of Glen Abbey to them. And I think it actually signifies what a strong connection it has to Glen Abbey has to the community. And that is, in essence, demonstrates the heart of a cultural heritage landscape. That is its objective. And its significance to the town, as you've heard from the delegations tonight, is what makes it important to the identity and the identification as a cultural heritage landscape. So with that, I turn it to Sue for the details.
As unusual as it is in Oakville's history for the residents to applaud staff at planning meetings, this is a heritage meeting, and it's fairly unusual here too. We really appreciate order and politesse. This is a polite and courteous town. I urge you to restrain your displays of approval and disapproval and be a proper council audience according to our rules. Thank you. Ms. Shepherd, we're looking forward to your report.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council, and to everybody in attendance tonight. It's slightly odd, I think, for me to be presenting something to you that's already been spoken quite eloquently about. And there will be some repetition here because I note that a lot of people here today have actually read these reports in detail and have followed along with the process. I am still going to go through some of the legislative steps that have been involved in our cultural heritage landscape strategy and the process that we've had to date, just to make sure everybody's clear of the details. So to begin with, the provincial policy statement from 2014 states that significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. The PPS then provides us with a very fulsome definition of what a cultural heritage landscape is and what it may involve, features such as structures, spaces, archaeological sites, or natural elements that are valued together for their interrelationship, meaning, or association. Further, the PPS defines significant in regards to heritage as resources that have been determined to have cultural heritage value or interest for the important contribution they make to our understanding of the history of a place, an event, or a people. And as such, on May 15th of this year, Oakville Town Council did recognize the Glen Abbey property as a significant cultural heritage landscape. The PPS and the 2017 growth plan both include a definition of conserved that I think is also important for us to note, because it means the identification, protection, management, and use of cultural heritage landscapes in a manner that ensures their cultural heritage value or interest is retained under the Ontario Heritage Act. And the growth plan goes on to state that cultural heritage resources will be conserved in order to foster a sense of place and benefit communities, particularly in strategic growth areas. The PPS and other provincial policies like the growth plan that I've just mentioned function together with the Ontario Heritage Act by the shared principle that cultural heritage resources shall be conserved. The image that's included here for you is actually a section taken right from the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, which is a document provided by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport to help municipalities understand how to designate and identify heritage resources and heritage properties, and especially cultural heritage landscapes. And you'll note that within that red box, we've got golf courses mentioned as well. The Ontario Heritage Act sets out the procedures for evaluating, protecting heritage resources at both the provincial and municipal levels. We're dealing with the municipal today. This includes the use of something called Ontario Regulation 906, which determines if a property has cultural heritage value. And Council has certainly seen us apply that regulation to many other properties before. A number of people today, including my commissioner, have mentioned the length of this project. And so I did want to include for you a timeline that shows how far back cultural heritage landscapes go, not just in the Oakville context, but also in the provincial context, going back to the 2005 provincial policy statement, which functioned along with the update to the Ontario Heritage Act of the same year. In 2009, the Livable Oakville Plan was introduced, and it mentioned the creation of a cultural heritage landscape strategy, which we then moved forward with and brought forward to Heritage Oakville in 2013 and Council at the beginning of 2014, a cultural heritage landscape strategy that would give the town a very, I think, clear and concise way of how to identify and manage and conserve these properties in the future. In 2014, the provincial policy statement was updated. And shortly after that, we began work on phase 1 of the implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, which was the inventory, which included 63 properties across Oakville. In 2017, we've noted that the growth plan is now being updated as well, as we continue in Oakville to move forward with the implementation of the strategy, with phase 2 for 6 of the 8 high priority properties being brought forward to Council earlier this year in May. And now here we are in August of 2017 with a notice of intention to designate for the Glen Abbey property, which Council had directed to be the priority property in the study. The Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy defined and described different types of cultural heritage landscapes, or CHLs as we like to refer to them. Design landscapes, organically evolved landscapes, and associative landscapes. It contained policies for the identification and protection of CHLs, and it gave us this recommendation of the inventory to be undertaken as a next step, and set forward the three-phase approach that we've been dealing with for the past several years. 1, inventory, 2, research and assessment, and 3, implementation of protection measures. The inventory completed in 2016 for all 63 properties included a priority level assessed for each one of those properties. And as you'll recall, Council directed us to move forward with the 8 high priority properties at that time. In May, we brought forward the research and assessment reports for 6 of those high priority properties, including Glen Abbey, and staff was directed at that time to proceed to phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy implementation for the Glen Abbey property. So as part of the implementation of phase 3, the town has retained several independent experts to provide additional information and advice regarding the Glen Abbey property and the golf course's cultural heritage value and heritage attributes. The report from Mr. Ken Moody, who's the Director of Creative Golf Design with a very impressive CV in both golf course design and renovation, has completed a golf course review for us for the Glen Abbey property. Mr. Julian Smith of Julian Smith and Associates Architects, who is a member of the Order of Canada and the former Executive Director of the Willowbank School of Conservation Arts, has provided the Cultural Heritage Landscape Values report for us as well. I'm just going to very briefly talk about these reports that are included in your agenda tonight. The golf course review by Mr. Moody provides very specific analysis and detail on the golf course itself and provides a comparison to the golf course as it was originally built and a commentary on the changes that have happened over the past almost 40 years. He's provided us with a hole-by-hole analysis that carefully considers the design intent and strategy behind each element of the course and concludes that the Glen Abbey Golf Course has a number of key attributes, including the spoke and wheel design of the golf course, which is the layout of the holes. In Mr. Moody's opinion, the arrangement of all of the holes and the relationship between them needs to be protected. And he noted that this applies both to the valley holes and the tableland holes, as well as the central clubhouse that acts as the hub of the wheel. Other heritage attributes include the designed features of the golf course, such as tees, hazards, plantings, which generally refers to trees, fairways, greens, and landforms, such as the spectator mounds that make the property such an important early example of a stadium-style golf course. The Cultural Heritage Landscape Values report from Mr. Smith provides a detailed analysis of the cultural heritage value of the Glen Abbey property as a significant cultural heritage landscape. In coming up with this report, Mr. Smith reviewed the Phase 2 report completed by Laterno Heritage Consulting, the ERA report that was submitted as part of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy, the golf course review by Mr. Moody, as well as other sources to prepare his recommendations on what a statement of cultural heritage value or interest and a description of the heritage attributes for the Glen Abbey property could include. In Mr. Smith's words, Glen Abbey is one of the most significant works by one of golf's most significant features, Jack Nicklaus. It ushered in a new era in tournament golf course design with its stadium and hub and spoke features. Its design is remarkable for the integration of artistry and craftsmanship, with many iconic stretches including the challenge and beauty of the valley holes and the drama of the final 2 holes. Its association with the Canadian Open has given it international significance and ties it to many of the leading figures in the sport. It is a landmark not only within the town of Oakville, but also across Canada and abroad. The property also contains associations with previous landscape layers through surviving remnants or features. And this refers to, in part, for example, the remnants of the Raydor estate that still remain on the property. So next steps, where are we today? Our commissioner certainly did mention that the notice of intention to designate is the first step in the designation process for council to consider. We'd also note that the proposed designation, including the description of heritage attributes and conservation measures, do reflect and accommodate the tournament golf course purpose of the course and its ongoing status as a venue for the Canadian Open and any other major tournaments. This isn't the only tool that we're considering to bring to you as Phase 3, but what we need to do first is to get your council's opinion on what the heritage values and attributes of the site are in order for us to appropriately consider other protection measures under Phase 3 of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy implementation. We've also noted that should a new designation bylaw for Glen Abbey eventually be passed somewhere down the road, the existing designation on the bylaw, on the site that refers to only the Raydor Estate House as a heritage attribute would then be repealed so that we don't have two layers of legislation on the property at the same time. So what's the designation process? After consulting with its Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, Council decides whether or not to issue the Notice of Intention to Designate. We have consulted with the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee, and they endorsed the staff recommendation that's before you tonight to issue the Notice of Intention to Designate. The Notice of Intention to Designate, should Council support it, is then served on the property owners, the Ontario Heritage Trust, and is published in the local newspaper. There's a 30-day appeal period beginning from the date of publication in the newspaper. If the designation is appealed, the matter is then referred to the Conservation Review Board, which is an independent review board set up by the province for a hearing. Following the hearing, the Conservation Review Board provides a recommendation report back to its municipal council. Council will receive the report and make their own determination whether or not to pass a designation bylaw for the property or to withdraw the Notice of Intention to Designate. What could this mean for Glen Abbey? Again, as our commissioner said, Glen Abbey is not a museum. We recognize that it is a living and dynamic place. Heritage designation is designed to manage change and to give consideration to changes that will ensure that the original design intent can be appreciated by future generations. And the intent is to give Glen Abbey a future based on its past. In order to implement a heritage designation bylaw, there are opportunities for the town to work with the property owner and stakeholders to prepare a conservation plan for the continued use of the cultural heritage landscape of the golf course. And a conservation plan could include, but is certainly not a definitive list, a description of changes that could be completely exempt from a heritage permit to ensure that the ongoing maintenance of the property is not onerous for the property owner. And it also could include a description or list of changes that could be approved in-house by staff without the need to go to the Heritage Committee and to Council for approval. Some of these changes are already probably included in the town's existing delegation bylaw, and that delegates the approval authority to staff for specific items. The Notice of Intention to Designate conserves and supports the continued use of the property as a championship tournament golf course, and if designation occurs, ongoing engagement with the property owner and stakeholders for that objective is welcome. In conclusion, I'd like to note that each phase of the implementation of the Cultural Heritage Landscape Strategy has advanced the town's understanding of the significant designed cultural heritage landscape of the Glen Abbey property, with an increasing level of detail and analysis at each phase of the process. As I mentioned to you earlier, the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee has been consulted with and has endorsed the designation of the property. And therefore, it is the recommendation that I bring to you tonight that a Notice of Intention to Designate under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for the Glen Abbey property be issued. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Please, members of council, do you have questions of Ms. Shepard? Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the report and for your work on this document. Just to give some sort of assurance to the applicant, having worked on the Oakville Heritage Committee and having had properties that were designated in the ward that Councillor Chisholm and I represent, prior to drafting a designating bylaw, it's exactly as you had outlined, working with the applicant in order to enable the property to have its best use going forward while still retaining the attributes that the heritage property has. Is that not correct?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, it is correct. The appropriate time to work on a management plan or conservation plan is after the notice of intention to designate has been issued, so that we can consider potentially including it in the bylaw or through other protection measures as well.
I know that in the one particular case that I think of, staff were able to modify the designating bylaw to incorporate a modern feature that would, again, as I say, permit a better use of the property going forward. So thank you.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that staff will continue to consider other conservation tools as part of implementation. You mentioned that changes could exempt certain items based on future conversations, and you could provide a list of changes that would be approved by staff. Is that similar to the current policy put in place last term, where heritage staff can deal directly with homeowners of designated homes, either individual or in a district, to work with colors and simple changes that don't have to go through advisory committee and through to council?
Through you, Your Worship, there actually could be a category of changes that would not require any kind of staff or committee approval. You would see those examples in the Bronte White Oak designation bylaw, where we had schedules that described what kind of work could be done in emergency circumstances without any kind of heritage permit. The Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District Plan is another example of a conservation document that includes a very clear and defined list of actions that a property owner may need to take that would be completely exempt from any type of heritage permit application, be it staff level or committee and council level. But again, we would expect that there would be potential changes that could be in any one of these categories completely exempt, or go through the staff approval process, or would again require committee and council approval depending on the extent of the changes proposed.
I appreciate the further details.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar?
Thank you very much. Through you, I heard Mr. Flowers say he felt this was overreach in the extreme when referring to the information. Do you feel that is a fair statement, or do you? I think I heard Ms. Closey, you say that you have given them everything you have, and like you will continue going forward to do the same. You will give them information and work with them to work through this.
Yes, certainly, and we have made that commitment to them to move, as we move forward. If council were to approve the notice of intent to designate and establish the values and attributes that you're looking at, then we would use those and work with the applicant in order to move towards a designation bylaw.
I appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Shopper, we did receive a letter that Heritage Committee received from Gulf Canada, which I believe Club Link brought forward, and they are not the applicant, but they had some concerns. I'm wondering if you might be able to just update us on any discussions we've had with Gulf Canada, or any conversations maybe with regards to the letter that they sent. Thank you.
We have had some preliminary discussions with Gulf Canada. We would also include them in any further discussion as we move forward. While they're not the property owner, we recognize that certainly. They do use the property as a tournament venue, so they're a good resource in order to understand what needs to be built into the designation bylaw to allow for that use to continue in the future.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Others? Council, I think we've come to the time to make a decision, and I would like to pass the chair to Councillor Lischina as the acting mayor and ask her to allow me to propose a motion and make some brief remarks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I now recognize you to make your remarks and your motion.
Thank you very much. It's my purpose here to move that a notice of intention to designate under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for the Glen Abbey property be issued. And I have the following comments, which I'd like to give after I find out if there's a seconder for that. Councillor Elgar? Thank you. Ms.
Your
Acting
Your
Mayor?
Worship, I recognize Councillor Elgar as seconding that motion.
Thank you. May I make my remarks now? Thank you. All we've heard from all concerned seems to want to jump to their own favored conclusion in this matter. And jumping to conclusions is just not possible in Ontario's given process. As citizens, we should be glad of that, because hasty decisions are not always very good ones, and a lengthy process allows us a chance to avoid error. This council has had a very good track record of making decisions that stand up, and I think it's because of the caution that we exercise in that regard. Basically, we all have to wait to the end of the processes that we're involved in to find out what's really going to happen. Now, I want to mention that former Mayor Harry Barrett was one of the people who originally persuaded me to run for mayor. And he charged me with his hope that we could grow and strengthen our heritage conservation in this town. And we've done a fair bit in that regard. We created an actual heritage department in our planning department. We were awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Award for community leadership. We were awarded the Prince of Wales Award for our municipal leadership and heritage. We were able to create the 4th Heritage District that Harry had so longed to see created, and he has seen that happen. We, in addition to the 4th District, we have more than 800 homes and a tree designated under the Heritage Act. And now, as a result of an initiative that we put in place in 2009, when we threw out the old official plan of the town of Oakville that was so loophole-ridden that no one could tell what it meant, and council often lost when it found itself defending itself in front of the Ontario Municipal Board. In that brand new from the ground up official plan, which we dubbed Livable Oakville in order to symbolize the hope with which we created it, one of the initiatives was that we would explore the development of heritage protection for cultural heritage landscapes. Now, we find ourselves in a point where I hope that everyone appreciates that we have built on the foundation that was created by Harry Barrett when he was mayor for 6 terms and led this town to cherish and protect and conserve its heritage. Now, tonight, I've heard that Glen Abbey is Oakville and Oakville is Glen Abbey. But the phrase that I will repeat at home tonight when my wife asks me what I heard, what stood out the most, I'm going to tell her first that the remark that struck me the most was, if Glen Abbey isn't heritage, what is? So with a great deal of hope, I'm moving this because our past is heritage and heritage is our future. Thank you very much. And Councillor Elgar, or Madam Mayor, Acting Mayor, those are my remarks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to ask any other councillors who would like to speak to the motion. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much through you, Acting Mayor. I'll be very short. What I would really like to do is thank all the people who came out tonight to show their support, whether for or against. It was incredible, and it was during the summer, and I don't think we've had this many people in the chamber for years. I'm really happy to support the next phase we're going to, and I would ask for a recorded vote at the appropriate time. I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Dedek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a famous quote by an unknown author that states, "You can't tell where you're going unless you know where you've been." This saying has resonated with me time and time again while I served on the Oakville Heritage Committee. When I started serving on that committee, I was provided with a copy that Susan referenced tonight, the Standards and Guidelines for the Conservation of Historic Places in Canada. And inside the binder were 4 separate books produced by the province of Ontario that spoke to various aspects of the Ontario Heritage Act. And I'm so glad that you zeroed in on that one, because that jumped out to me as well when it said golf courses. In anticipation of tonight's meeting, I researched other municipalities in Ontario who are also conserving cultural heritage landscapes. In October 2013, the Waterloo region implemented guidelines for their cultural heritage landscapes. And in their description, what makes a cultural heritage landscape? They describe it as a location where the influence of humans on the natural landscape has resulted in a place with distinctive character and cultural importance. These historically significant landscapes are valued for the important contribution they make to our understanding of the history of a place, an event, and individual or community. It goes on and outlines several categories that I do believe also apply to the Glen Abbey property. Sense of place provides a physical and psychological foundation for their regional identity. Authenticity, learning from the multi-layered past, enjoying the vibrancy of the present, and creating meaningful linkages for the future. And finally, quality of life. Provide economic, environmental, social, and cultural benefits through aesthetic, ecological, recreational, and educational opportunities. Conserving conservation heritage landscapes will make the region, in our case, the town, a better place to live, work, and visit. And it was interesting, on the website of the Canada's Historic Places, they cite several golf courses. Canada's historic golf courses have a certain charm. Not only is the natural beauty of the surrounding landscape of particular importance for a golf course, but also the specific design of the various holes. Combine these features with buildings of architectural and historic interest, and associations with important people in the world of golf, as well as the overall longevity of the sites themselves, and you get places that form key parts of our cultural heritage. But tonight we're not considering the Waterloo Region's report, or any other municipality for that matter. Tonight we're considering the recommendation that was passed by our Oakville Heritage Committee to issue a notice of intention to designate under Section 29, Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act on the Glen Abbey property. I have read and reread the report that was prepared by our heritage planning staff in consultation with Mr. Ken Moody and Mr. Julian Smith. And I can honestly say that all of the research papers and reports I've read on heritage matters, I've never read such a well-researched and well-documented report. Our heritage planning staff have always provided this council and our Oakville Heritage Committee with excellent backgrounders, reports, and advice on heritage matters. But this document's exceptional. Well done. Throughout the analysis of the course, something jumped out at me time and time again, and that was the reference of the one key design of Glen Abbey Golf Course being a spoken wheel design or a central theme. I believe this spoken wheel or central theme design has permeated its spokes beyond the borders of Glen Abbey, throughout the Oakville community and beyond our town borders. It's a landmark that is well known across Canada and abroad. Oakville has always demonstrated a strong voice when it comes to the town's heritage. Whether it's championing the designation of a 250-year-old great white oak tree on Bronte Road, as was referenced tonight, advocating for the designation of our downtown business district, or in our case, the Oakville Arena. Oakville residents continue to advocate for conserving our town's heritage. Your attendance tonight is yet another demonstration of how much we value and cherish this town's heritage. So thank you for coming out and making your voices heard. During our Oakville 150th anniversary celebration, we hosted numerous celebrations and commemorative publications, and it was apparent that our strong ties to heritage have definitely influenced the Oakville community over the years. As the City of Perth has said, heritage is about the things from the past which are valued enough today to save for tomorrow. Well, I am of the belief that Glen Abbey has heritage attributes that are definitely worth saving for tomorrow. And as such, I will be wholeheartedly voting in favor of the Oakville Heritage Committee's recommendation to issue a notice of intention to designate the Glen Abbey property. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. I understand that we're reaching 10 p.m. And there are a number of councillors still on my list who would like to speak to the motion. So Councillor Adams has indicated that he will make the motion to go beyond 10 o'clock. Is that correct? And Councillor Mill will support that. And is everyone in favor? Thank you. Motion is passed. Next on my list is Councillor Omer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Discenza. And I want to thank staff as well for such a fantastic report. Well, I wouldn't profess to be an expert in the physical landscape issues that Mr. Moody raised. I would classify myself as somewhat of a more understanding in the nuance of cultural associations, having amassed quite a student line of credit to study that. So I know what that's about. The impressive part that I like about the associative cultural landscape issue, as defined by the World Heritage Committee, it means that there's value because of religious, artistic, or cultural associations of that natural element. So the religious element, I think it's a close second to every church, the praying for miracles on that golf course at any given day. So we've got that. The artistic element, I don't think I've spoken to a single person who wasn't right beside the green when Tiger made that shot. I'm pretty sure I heard a few people say they were raking up the sand traps after him. But the cultural associations speak to the shared history that we all have around a golf course. And I remember being a young man, about 9 years old, and following the mob, trying to get a golf ball from a golfer or a glove, and the throng is there, and all of a sudden I get bumped by a golf cart, and who is it but Jack Nicklaus himself? Gets out, comes, picks me up, and he said, "Watch where you're going, young man." And he threw me the golf glove, and all the kids just went away. But those are the stories that we hear. We heard them tonight collectively from person after person about those shared history and those moments that we all sort of bring together to create an interwoven fabric of what a cultural association is. So I recognize that. All the residents that I've spoken to recognize that, and I am happy to support the motion, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Mara. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all of the feedback that I've been receiving over the past several weeks, both for and against on both sides of this issue. As detailed in our reports, a number of professionals have provided compelling fact-based reasoning on the features and cultural attributes of Glen Abbey, and I will fully support the motion before us this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. I believe Councillor Hutchins did have his hand up, so since we're moving towards myself here, then he's next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Discenza. I want to personally thank you all for coming out here. I think a lot of people's presentations were absolutely excellent, and I also have to thank staff for a very thorough job. As a member of the Heritage Committee since 2014, I'm sure you heard that we've been looking at the number of possible heritage landscapes. I believe Susan mentioned 63. Glen Abbey was one of them, obviously a very key one, but certainly we're looking at at a lot of other cultural heritage landscapes right across Oakville. After all the work that the staff has done, I came to learn from all the experts exactly what an enormous impact Glen Abbey has made on Oakville over the years, starting back way before in the indigenous people and going through the various other eras and ending up with Jack Nicholas and his design of the spoke and wheel for Glen Abbey. So after learning all these from the experts, I certainly intend to support staff to designate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchins. Councillor Chisholm, I couldn't see you from here. You are next.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful evening of people coming forward to talk about the benefits of Glen Abbey Golf Course and what it attributes to Oakville. I've lived in Oakville all my life. I was born here, and I've seen a lot of changes, good changes, some questionable, but overall our council has been very receptive to good planning, and I have to attribute that to our staff and our cultural staff and our heritage staff. With respect to what stood out for me was the operative words of passion, legacy, shared experience, all those things we all have an emotional tie to, and it's very important. Within Oakville, it is a gem, and I want to quote back, just give me 30 seconds and I'll finish off, but this really stuck to me when I read the report, and it's basically the heritage attributes. Glen Abbey is one of the most significant works by one golf's most significant figures, Jack Nicklaus. It has ushered in a new era of tournaments, tournament golf, course design with its stadium and hub-spoke features. Its design is remarkable for the integration of artistry, craftsmanship with many iconic stretches, including challenge and beauty of the valley holes and the drama of a final two holes. Its association with the Canadian Open has given it international significance and ties to many of the leading figures in the sport. It is a landmark not only within the town of Oakville, but across Canada and abroad. The property also contains association with some previous landscape layers through surviving remnants or features. To me, that tells the story. I am in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Next on this side, we have Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple quick points. First of all, I just want to point out the relative unfairness of the fact that Councillor Elgar got to second this motion, because while most of this golf course is in Ward 4, Councillor Grant and I proudly represent hole 13. So, which is clearly the best hole. I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the level of discussion tonight from the members of the community that came forward with really well thought out positions and well researched concepts. I've been here for 17 years, and it's not always this eloquent. We often get lots and lots of repeat statements over and over again, but tonight you were very well disciplined, except for the occasional clapping and the one bad incident we won't talk about again. But I really want to thank you for helping shape my position on this issue tonight. It was really important. A couple things I just wanted to reemphasize this evening. Some of the delegates tonight made some really important points that really spoke to me, and one was this isn't just about golf, it's about the life events and the position that Glen Abbey plays within this community. And I think about two things myself. Councillor Elgar and I were elected at the same time in 2000. I think that was, we celebrated our election victory at Glen Abbey, so that's a very memorable occasion for us when we both joined the team here. And it was also the location of the second anniversary of my wife's 25th birthday. So that was a memorable event in the Knoll household. I want to agree with Councillor Stoat, having listened to all of this evening, that there really are no arguments against this. I've thoroughly read the reports, I've listened to the staff, and as I said, pay particular attention to what you had to say tonight. And it's clear to me that the answers to the three questions that were posed to us this evening from the delegate, and I can't remember the lady's name, I apologize, that brought us the picture from the wall from her trips out east, and it was what is right, what is just, and what is in the public good. And from my opinion tonight, from listening to you, from the reports, from the fantastic job the staff and the consultants have done, the answer to all three of these questions are clear, and that is to proceed with the notice of intent to designate.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Next, we have Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's late, I'll be brief. Last Tuesday, I was part of the Heritage Committee that sat and endorsed the proposal to move this forward. I came in tonight hoping to hear compelling arguments one way or the other. We did not hear at the Heritage Committee last week many compelling arguments against, and I was hoping there might be some. But what I did walk away with tonight was the compelling argument that Oakville really does have a soft spot in its heart for Glen Abbey. We have taken our own personal stories and we've built them up and we've made this community a very important, somebody mentioned earlier the green beating heart of Oakville. And I guess in a sense that really is, when something further helps us with our own stories and our own lives, we make it an icon, and it's become an icon in our community. And so from that, I'm going to support the motion that's been made tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Last but not least, my ward mate, Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. We've heard a whole bunch of speeches, so I'm going to try and be brief. But Councillor Dudek spoke very eloquently earlier on about this issue, and I value her leadership on heritage matters very often, and tonight is no exception. So thank you for covering so many bases already. I want to thank all the delegations this evening, starting with Peter Longo, who you might remember from way back when he tottered up with his broken leg. He's a longtime volunteer in Oakville, and all the way down through many, many delegations, several dozen tonight, plus several from the floor, representing people from all parts of Oakville and old-time residents who've been here for generations, to those who are relatively new to Oakville, bringing forward information to us that I found very compelling and very reasonable. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking that time and doing their homework. I'd also like to thank all of our staff who have been working very diligently for us for a number of years on this matter now. They've conducted a very thorough review of the significance of the cultural landscape, the cultural heritage elements of Glen Abbey, and in particular the heritage values and attributes. Their work has been very compelling as well. So I'd like to thank both the delegates, the members of the public here tonight, as well as our staff who have been working for us. I'll, of course, be supporting the recommendation this evening that's before us as an important step towards protecting our cultural heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. We have been asked to have a recorded vote. I do want to remind Councillor Lapworth that he has a pecuniary interest, and also that Councillor Robinson is actually absent. I didn't see when he left, but he is not here. So when I call your name, please stand if you are in favor. Oh. All right. Since everybody spoke here, all of those in favor, please stand. And I'm right here. Okay. So Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Dudek, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Gittings, Councillor Hutchins, Mayor Burton, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, and Councillor Lishchina. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll resume the chair. Thank you, Councillor, for your very good service, and I will resume the chair.
So I will now take it back to you, Mayor Burton.
Thank you. Council, you have your information items circulated electronically and your status of outstanding issues. Is there new business? I'm not aware of any. And Madam Clerk, I don't see any. Regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees, nothing. Requests for reports, I'm not aware of any, none. Then perhaps two of you could give me a motion and a second for the consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Dudek, all those in favor? And the bylaws as presented are adopted. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.